Chapter 159. Yanduo couldn't help but spit out all the wine in his mouth onto Wu Zhanfeng's face. Yanduo turned his head and stared at where Xia Pingan was. The expression on his face could no longer be described with the word astonishment. Wu Zhanfeng, who was sprayed with wine, also seemed to have forgotten about the wine on his face. He also looked at where Xia Pingan was in astonishment. The restaurant was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. The people who were still chatting were all silent. Everyone turned their heads and looked at where Xia Pingan and Ming Rulan were. Yanduo was also very surprised. What was going on? The first thing that the beautiful Ming Rulan, whose temperament was like an orchid in an empty valley, said in public was to confess her love to Xia Pingan? Standing where Yanduo was and looking at Ming Rulan and Xia Pingan, he could see Ming Rulan's curvy figure. Ming Rulan's gorgeous long dress dragged on the ground, like the bright moonlight sprinkling on the ground. Ming Rulan, who was wearing high heels, didn't lose to Xia Pingan at all. She was even slightly taller. Her beautiful side profile and her beautiful black hair were all soul-stirring. Where am I lacking? After the surprise, Yanduo felt inexplicably indignant. Xia Pingan never flirted with girls. He didn't have any interaction with Ming Rulan before. Why were all these girls rushing to Xia Pingan's side? Did Xia Pingan awaken some ability to bewitch women and didn't tell him? Then, under everyone's gaze, Xia Pingan didn't say anything. He just left the restaurant with Ming Rulan. Were they going to the bridal chamber? Xia Pingan, you beast! Yanduo's thoughts were running wild. Then, he saw Wu Zhanfeng wiping the wine off his face and staring at him. When Xia Pingan and Ming Rulan left the restaurant, the others were naturally too embarrassed to chase after them. Fortunately, the two didn't seem to have gone too far. Through the restaurant's glass wall, they could see Xia Pingan and Ming Rulan walking to the garden outside the restaurant. From here, they could still see their back. Xia Pingan exchanged a few words with Ming Rulan. After that, Ming Rulan smiled and left. Only Xia Pingan returned to the restaurant. Yanduo couldn't help but lean over and ask in a low voice, "Have you known Ming Rulan for a long time?" "This is the first time we've spoken today." Xia Pingan shrugged. "Then why did she? That girl is a little special. She's different from the masses." "What's so special?" "I promised her that I would keep her secret." Yanduo smiled evilly and winked at Xia Pingan. He looked like he deserved a beating. "You didn't promise her, did you?" "Promise what?" That to become her husband?" "I promised her that we could be friends in the future." "That's it?" Yanduo seemed to be in disbelief as he watched the juicy gossip fly away in front of him. "What else?" Although the two of them were talking in the restaurant, the people around them were listening attentively. They heard Xia Pingan's words. They didn't expect Ming Rulan to make a surprise appearance at the last dinner before they left. She even almost made a small scandal that could make people's eyeballs pop out. This was interesting. What was so special about Ming Rulan? Why would such a woman look at Xia Pingan in a different light? Many people had this question in their hearts. However, Xia Pingan didn't say anything, so everyone could only keep this small question in their hearts. Only Jiang Duer's gaze towards Xia Pingan became brighter and deeper. Among everyone, only Jiang Duer could roughly guess something. Jiang Duer also knew why Ming Rulan was usually cold and didn't like to interact with people. This was because Ming Rulan had awakened a very powerful mind-reading ability. For such a beautiful woman with such an ability, interacting with people was a very painful thing for Ming Rulan. Ming Rulan knew very well what men and women would think when they saw her. Therefore, Ming Rulan preferred to be alone most of the time. To Ming Rulan, being alone was a special kind of misophobia. This ability and long-term habit of being alone also made Ming Rulan's behavior very different from the rest. However, Ming Rulan actually trusted Xia Pingan. This was out of Jiang Duer's expectations. Unless, in Ming Rulan's eyes, Xia Pingan's heart was very clean. It was so clean that Ming Rulan trusted him. Tonight's banquet ended just like that for the 54 people who participated in the Skymender plan. Many of them found teammates tonight. Even if they didn't, they still got to know each other better. Early the next morning, after a night of rest, the 54 people, including Xia Pingan, came to the teleportation area of the base for the first time. The teleportation area was at the bottom of the base. It was heavily guarded. To enter the teleportation area, they had to pass through several security doors. General Zhang Yuzhong personally led everyone into the huge round room where the spatial rift leading to the other world was located. In the center of the room, more than 2 meters above the ground, there were 2 huge metal rings. In the middle of the 2 metal rings, there was a 20-meter-tall circular spatial rift that was flashing with milky white light in front of everyone's eyes. That spatial rift was different from all the spatial rifts that Xia Pingan had seen before. The spatial rift in front of them was like a kaleidoscope that bullied people's eyes. White light and fog rolled inside. Looking at it from different angles, the spatial rift gave people a completely different feeling. In some people's eyes, the spatial rift was rolling outwards as if it was going to spit out something at any time. In others' eyes, the spatial rift was shrinking inwards as if it was going to swallow something at any time. This place was heavily guarded. The entire building was like a huge metal ball that could be sealed off at any time. A large group of soldiers and summoners were stationed here. At the same time, a group of researchers and scientists in white coats were busy in the surrounding rooms. General, everything is normal with the spatial rift. We can teleport at any time. A scientist in a white coat and glasses walked over and reported to Zhang Yuzhong. Zhang Yuzhong nodded. He looked at the 54 students and said calmly, "The situation at the spatial rift is normal. Girls, go over first." 8 female summoners, including Jiang Duo and Ming Rulan, walked out of the team and stood in front of the spatial rift one by one. "Salute!" Following Zhang Yuzhong's order, all the soldiers present gave them a solemn military salute. Although the 8 female summoners were women, their actions at this moment were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. They were not afraid of death and had a heroic spirit that was not inferior to men. The 8 women did not hesitate. They stepped into the spatial rift together and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Xia Pingan and the others were waiting patiently below. According to the base, the other side of the spatial rift was in a huge cave on a deserted island. The deserted island was located in the sea southwest of the Mujiao continent, one of the 9 continents of the Yuanqiu world. The island was more than 300 miles away from the coast. There were a few small family forces near the coast and a bustling port city. As long as they reached the island, they could use the trees on the island to build boats and rafts to leave. Of course, if they were confident in their swimming ability, they could also try to swim over. 300 miles was not far. In the sea near the island, there were no powerful sea monsters except for sharks and sea snakes. The first few batches of people who entered had already renovated the cave on the island and turned it into a secret stronghold. They left a lot of things in the cave, such as clothes and some belongings. Jiang Duo and the others were not in any danger in the cave. After waiting for 2 hours, Zhang Yuzhong spoke again. He nodded at Xia Pingan and the others. "You can go over now." Xia Pingan and the others also walked to the spatial rift on the platform. 46 men, just like 46 members of a suicide squad going on an expedition. "Salute!" General Zhang Yuzhong and the soldiers present saluted Xia Pingan and the others again. After taking one last look at the base, Xia Pingan was the first to walk into the spatial rift. The others also walked into the spatial rift one by one. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared in front of everyone in the base. Zhang Yuzhong watched Xia Pingan and the others leave. His lips were tightly pursed. There was respect in his eyes, but also a trace of pain and regret that others could not detect. These 54 people were the elites of the younger generation of summoners in the Great Fire Country. These 54 people would most likely die. Even if they survived, they might not be able to come back. However, for the country, in order to end the catastrophe brought to this world by the spatial invasion, someone had to make a sacrifice. They were the ones who had to make that sacrifice. Zhang Yuzhong stood in front of the spatial rift and looked at the unpredictable spatial rift. His body was as straight as a stone pillar, and he did not move for a long time. A few minutes later, the spatial rift, flashing with a milky white brilliance, seemed to have some abnormalities. The white light inside started to distort irregularly, and there was a faint trace of red light coming out of the spatial rift. This situation had never happened before. Zhang Yuzhong's expression changed slightly. All the staff in the teleportation area suddenly became nervous. The soldiers had already entered their respective combat positions. The summoners were ready to cast their spells. The muzzles of several electromagnetic cannons, sliding on the dome of the teleportation space, were already aimed at the spatial rift. This spatial crack was two-way, so there was no telling what would come out of it. Reporting to General, we have detected spatial turbulence. It has already interfered with the stability of the spatial rift. The scientist wearing a white coat and glasses ran over, sweating profusely. Spatial turbulence, not a spatial invasion. That was fine. The spatial turbulence lasted for 2 minutes before disappearing. The spatial rift was normal. Zhang Yuzhong sighed in relief. Chapter 160. After entering the space crack, Xia Pingan felt as if he was flying in a weightless tunnel. Lights and shadows were flickering around him, and all kinds of colorful lights were swirling around him like a nebula. The clothes that he was wearing before were like sand and running water, dissipating little by little. In the blink of an eye, Xia Pingan felt that he was completely naked from head to toe. Sure enough, after entering the space crack, one couldn't bring anything else with them. Not only the things on his body, but even the small amount of ammunition and 2 sets of clothes that Xia Pingan had placed in his space warehouse were automatically squeezed out of the secret mandala's space warehouse after Xia Pingan entered the space crack, just like toothpaste being stepped out by an elephant. They dissipated little by little in front of Xia Pingan like quicksand. He didn't lose a lot of things. Those were only used by Xia Pingan to test if he was an exception. As it turned out, when he was passing through the space crack, he was no exception. Yan Duo, Wu Zhanfeng, and the others followed closely behind him into the space crack. However, when Xia Pingan looked around, he couldn't see anyone else. A few minutes after entering the space crack, Xia Pingan felt a red light pouring in from the space crack. Then, the nebula that had been swirling in front of him started to become chaotic. The entire space crack seemed to be shaking and twisting, making him dizzy and seeing stars. He felt as if his brain was about to be shaken out. He was like a fallen leaf in a storm. He no longer felt as stable as before. After an unknown period of time, boom, Xia Pingan felt as if he was a cannonball that had been spat out by the space crack. He fell to the ground and felt dizzy all of a sudden. Xia Pingan lay motionless on the ground. After a full 2 to 3 minutes, Xia Pingan finally felt the terrifying dizziness in his head and the little stars in his eyes gradually disappear. He gradually recovered. The soil under him was a little loose. Xia Pingan's face was stuck to the ground. He could smell the scent of the soil with his nose. The scent was unique to the wild and primitive smell of the forest soil. It was the scent of the soil and fallen leaves that had coexisted for countless years. At once, Xia Pingan became alert. Wasn't there a cave on the other side of the space crack? The scent that he smelled was wrong. Xia Pingan slowly opened his eyes. The surrounding light was a little dim. As far as the eye could see, there was a huge pine tree. The trunk of the pine tree was right in front of his head. The trunk of the big tree was almost as thick as a house. It was completely possible to open a tunnel in the trunk. Not a cave. There couldn't be a tree in a cave. Xia Pinggan's face changed as he completely woke up. He instantly got up and squatted on the ground as he glanced around vigilantly. This was indeed not a cave. There were huge pine trees with frighteningly thick trunks all around. There was a layer of clouds in the sky. Behind the hazy clouds there were two moons, one big and one small. The big moon was a semicircle, while the small moon was a crescent shaped like a sickle. The moonlight penetrated through the clouds and covered the surrounding woods. There was a thin layer of fog in the woods. The air in the woods carried a wisp of chill before dawn. How could it be here? Thinking of the red light that had surged out of the space crack, Xia Pinggan immediately understood that something must have gone wrong during the transmission. But where is this place? Am I still on that deserted island? Xia Pinggan used his remote vision to look around from the air. This was not a deserted island. Within a radius of 100 miles, there was only forest and wilderness. The vegetation in the woods was abnormally tall. There was not a single sea in sight. He only saw a river a few miles away. In the forest, there were a few scattered small villages. This was definitely not a deserted island. But where is this place? Xia Pinggan could only scratch his head. Wait, this forest seems to be too quiet. The sounds of the surrounding birds and insects seem to have disappeared. This doesn't seem right. Xia Pinggan reacted all of a sudden. He sniffed carefully and discovered that there was a murderous and bloody aura floating in the surrounding air. Xia Pinggan's heart skipped a beat. He glanced around, quickly found some leaves and vines, and wrapped them around his body to cover his private part. Once again, he was Yu Chao. After making the most primitive clothes and putting them on, Xia Pinggan summoned the black dragon and let the black dragon lead him to the place where the bloody smell came from. After walking for 2 kilometers in the woods, Xia Pinggan finally found the source of the bloody smell. In a large valley full of rocks, there were more than 100 scattered corpses. The blood flowing from the corpses made the air of the valley smell like a slaughterhouse. After using his remote vision to observe for a while and confirming that there was no danger, Xia Pinggan entered the valley. The corpses in the valley were all human. The corpses were dressed differently. There were men and women, but most of them were men. There were some weapons and a small number of guns scattered around the scene. The surrounding ground and tree trunks were a mess. There seemed to have been an intense battle here. Xia Pinggan saw terrifying craters on the ground of the valley, as if it had been bombarded by heavy artillery. There were also large patches of blackened rocks and icicles stuck in the ground that hadn't completely melted. These were all traces left behind by the use of spells. The valley was filled with a thick aura of divine power. After taking a closer look at the corpses, Xia Pinggan's heart trembled. Many of the corpses were probably summoners. Furthermore, they were powerful 1-sun or 2-sun realm summoners. Before coming here, Xia Pinggan had heard from the chief researcher of the base that some summoners in this world liked to wear a golden headband on their foreheads after they officially entered the first sun realm. It was a symbol of their status as a summoner. There would be a sun on the headband of a 1-sun realm summoner, 2 suns on the headband of a 2-sun realm summoner, and so on. Of course, not all summoners liked to wear this kind of ornament, but those who wore it were definitely summoners. Xia Pinggan swept his gaze over the corpses. There were more than a dozen 1-sun and 2-sun realm summoners among them. On the charred corpses, the 2 suns could still be clearly seen on the golden headband on their foreheads. F***CK, what's going on here? Xia Pinggan had seen many corpses before, but seeing so many summoners' corpses as soon as he arrived was still a huge shock to Xia Pinggan. Xia Pinggan didn't know what had happened here, but he knew that if he wasn't careful, he could become one of the corpses on the ground. After confirming that there were no abnormalities in the surroundings, Xia Pinggan gathered his courage and approached the corpses. After a quick scan of the valley, Xia Pinggan found the male corpse. It was not far from him, lying in a pile of rocks. The male corpse was about the same size as him, and there was a black wound on his forehead. There was no blood around the wound, and there was a layer of frost on his head. The male corpse was dressed in black, and there was a belt around his waist and shoulders. He was holding a broken sword in his hand, and there were yellow bullets stuck in the belt. His eyes were wide open and filled with terror. "Brother, I don't know your name, but your clothes are useless anyway. They look clean, so I'll borrow them to wear." Xia Pingan came to the side of the corpse, clapped his hands, and muttered. Then, he started to strip off the corpse's clothes. Regardless of whether the clothes belonged to the dead or not, they were still better than the leaf clothes he was wearing now. The leaf clothes he was wearing could only cover his private parts, but there was no way he could meet anyone, let alone travel far. After stripping off the corpse's clothes, Xia Pingan quickly put them on. At this time, he couldn't care less. The boots on the corpse were similar to the ones on Xia Pingan's feet, so Xia Pingan didn't hold back. In the end, other than the stinky socks and underwear on the corpse, Xia Pingan had almost stripped the corpse naked. After putting on the clothes, pants, boots, and belt, Xia Pingan felt much better. He finally looked like a human, and at least his but wouldn't be blown by the wind. Except for the clothes and weapons, the corpse seemed to have been searched, and there was nothing valuable. Xia Pingan checked the other corpses next to him, and they were all the same. Those corpses had been searched, and there was nothing valuable on them. Just because there was nothing valuable, it didn't mean that there was nothing valuable. Looking at the weapons on the ground, as well as the gold frontlets on the foreheads of the summoners, and thinking about his current penniless situation, Xia Pingan went all out, and threw everything that could still be used into his space warehouse. He got dozens of weapons, as well as a few gold frontlets. After doing all this, Xia Pingan used his requiem banner, and performed a requiem ceremony on the corpses in the valley, and the corpses were all expiated. "I've taken your things, so I'll send you on your way safely. Let's call it even." After the requiem ceremony, Xia Pingan was about to leave, but he found that an old man in a green robe and a few young men in gorgeous armor were standing on a huge rock behind him. Standing beside the old man were a few young people, both male and female. All of them looked at Xia Pingan with cold eyes. When did these people come? He didn't even know. Cold sweat broke out on Xia Pingan's forehead. Chapter 161. The green-robed elder had an aquiline nose and a sharp gaze. His aura was like that of a thunderbolt, ready to explode at any moment. Xia Pingan could feel his heart beating like a drum and sweat pouring out of his forehead. He felt a great sense of fear and pressure just by being stared at by the elder. There were 4 young people standing beside the elder, 2 men and 2 women. They were in their 20s or 30s. Their auras were steady and they were full of heroic spirit. However, the way they looked at Zhou Bao was filled with scrutiny and a trace of coldness. The 4 young people were wearing armor, but the shape of the armor was somewhat familiar to Xia Pingan. The armor they wore had a cape and a pendant. The pendant and the body of the armor were shaped like fish scales. The pendant and shoulder pieces were square and had a square collar. The lapels were on the right shoulder and under the armpit and were fastened with 3 sets of silk buckles. The armor of the 4 people was decorated with gold and silver. The front chest and back of the armor, as well as the lower part of the armor, had diamond-shaped gold and silver pieces attached to the armor to form a pattern. The armor that did not have gold and silver pieces attached to it was decorated with red ribbons to form 2 overlapping diamond-shaped decorations. In addition to the armor, each of the 4 people had a scale-shaped iron helmet on their heads. They looked very majestic. The armor that the 4 young people wore was a classic Han Dynasty style in Xia Pingan's eyes. However, the armor was probably custom-made for the 4 of them. There were some differences in the length and size of the armor. There was also a trace of divine power on the armor, and the armor plates faintly glowed. The armor seemed to be a magic weapon. "Is this fellow so poor that he's gone mad? How dare he stare at our magic weapon armors?" He's not even at the one sun stage. Could it be that he wants our magic weapon armors? A tall and strong young man with a dark face who was standing on the left side of the old man in green robe threw a cold glance at Xia Pingan as he raised his mouth corners and revealed a sarcastic smile. Licking his lips, he said, "Elder Lu, this guy is in Pine Plain. I'm afraid that he's with those bandits who want to rob the secret items. He's not a good guy. Let me kill him." As he spoke, the young man took a step forward. The divine power on his body surged, making Xia Pingan feel a great sense of danger. He could smell the scent of death. Xia Pingan stood in place with his head held high and his chest out. There was no fear on his face. He already felt that once the other party attacked, he would not be able to escape. However, Xia Pingan did not give up on the opportunity to communicate with the other party. He knew that at times like this, he could not show the slightest fear and escape. If he did not respond properly, the other party would attack. The corpses on the ground. Those 1 sun and 2 sun were massacred. If the other party attacked, he would be finished. Of people to kill, of 1 and 2 sun, to be killed if the other party attacked. He would be if the other party attack. And disregard of human lives. To disregard for human life. And to be. S. People. Of the attack. To be. Young. His. Of a. The. To. Him. To the. "What's your name?" the old man asked. "My name is Xia Pingan," Xia Pingan said calmly. For some reason, he had a strong intuition that he could not lie at this time. It would be bad if he did. "Why are you here?" the old man continued asking. "I don't know why. I don't know why I'm here either. When I woke up, I was in the forest over there. I was naked and had nothing on me. I smelled the stench of blood here, so I came over to take a look. Then, I found these corpses. I didn't have any clothes or anything on me, so I borrowed their things. I didn't take their things for free. I took their things and helped them rest their souls, so we're even," Xia Pingan said loudly with a calm expression. Although he hid some important information in his words, not a word was false. Everything he said was true. Xia Pingan just did not say how he got here. Could it be that this person was robbed by the soulless technique? Even his clothes were stripped clean. A woman on the right side of the old man looked at Xia Pingan and said softly, "Sister Qing, it's possible. Look at him. He even wants the scrap metal on the ground. As long as he can sell it for money, he won't let go of anything. I guess he's really poor." Now, there are people from all walks of life gathered in Wansong Plain, another man said. After hearing Xia Pingan's words, the old man in the green robe looked at Xia Pingan with a slightly gentler gaze. The pressure on Xia Pingan suddenly decreased a lot. "Did you summon that dog?" the old man in the green robe asked as he pointed at the black dragon not far away. Xia Pingan looked at the black dragon and found that the black dragon was dozens of meters away. There was a cloud of black fog around the black dragon's body, which wrapped around the black dragon. The black dragon was motionless as if it had been fixed. No wonder the black dragon didn't react just now. It turned out that it had been fixed by a secret method. Xia Pingan nodded. "Wansong Plain is the territory of our Tang family. Outsiders are forbidden to enter. You've broken the law of our Tang family by trespassing into Wansong Plain," the old man in the green robe said as he looked at the black-faced young man who wanted to kill Xia Pingan. "Tang Long, take this person and bring him back to the criminal law hall in Wansong Plain." "Yes." When the black-faced man called Tang Long heard this, he immediately pointed at Xia Pingan. A black rope appeared out of thin air and flew toward Xia Pingan. In the blink of an eye, it tied Xia Pingan up tightly. As soon as the rope was tied, Xia Pingan not only felt that his body couldn't move, but even the divine power in the secret mandala was imprisoned. The summoners in this world were indeed unimaginably powerful. Although he was tied up, Xia Pingan was relieved. These people wanted to take him back to Wansong Plain, so they wouldn't kill him. He just had to deal with them slowly. Just as Xia Pingan was tied up, a brilliant seven-colored light suddenly burst into the sky in the east more than 100 miles away. The light was too dazzling. Xia Pingan looked over and saw a golden door appear in the seven-colored light. The door suddenly opened, and then a figure came out of the door and flew directly toward him. Yes, it was flying toward him. Xia Pingan's divine power was imprisoned, but he still had the ability to see from afar. Through his vision, he saw that the figure flying toward him was a bearded man with a huge wine gourd on his back. Behind the bearded man, there were two people who pushed open the golden door in the void and chased after him. Damn it, he also flew. Xia Pingan almost wanted to rub his eyes. The three figures, like three long rainbows, directly cut across the sky. They were as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, they flew into the sky where the naked eye could see. Lu Chonglao, stop him. The secret treasure of void has been taken by him. A flustered and exasperated voice came from the sky in the distance. It rumbled like thunder, and Xia Pingan heard it. Hearing this voice, the cyan-robed old man, who was standing on the stone, suddenly flew up. With a wave of his hand, two powerful sword immortals, who were flashing with red light and standing on long swords, appeared beside the cyan-robed old man. The two sword immortals stepped on the long swords, flew across the void, and directly attacked the bearded man. Ha! The secret treasure of void belongs to the virtuous. The entrance of the secret treasure of void just happened to appear in Wansong Plain. It has nothing to do with your Tang family. Your Tang family is not capable of occupying such a treasure. So what if I take it? Bite my ass if you dare, the bearded man said. As soon as he released his hand, Xia Pingan saw that he scattered shells all over the sky. Yes, shells. The shells shattered in the void at once and turned into a more than 100 m long, ferocious bone dragon covered with rolling black fog. Abyss dragon summoning. The armored young men in front of Xia Pingan exclaimed as their faces changed. The bone dragon opened its mouth in the sky, causing a roaring wind, which directly swallowed the two sword immortals who were rushing towards it. In the next second, the bone dragon opened its mouth again, causing the sky within 50 miles to be covered by rolling black clouds, which even covered the moon. Within the black clouds, a few loud rumbling sounds came, like thunder. After a short while, the black fog in the sky dispersed while the bone dragon and the bearded man had disappeared. Three figures then descended from the sky. Elder Lu landed on the ground. His footsteps were a bit weak as he staggered. The other two people also landed on the ground unsteadily. One of them even spat out a small mouthful of blood. The three people's faces turned ghastly pale. Xia Pingan was dumbfounded. Especially when the bearded man summoned the Abyss Dragon. His power was indescribable. That was the ability of a powerful summoner. He had never seen or heard of such a thing. Chapter 162. Of the two people who landed on the ground, one was wearing a black robe, while the other was wearing a blue robe. Both of them had silver hair. The one in the black robe was skinny and his skin was like a withered tree. His hands were like chicken claws. He spat out blood as he coughed. His body under the black robe trembled as he coughed, like a withered tree trunk that would break at any time. The old man in the blue robe had a round face and small eyes. He was slightly fat and didn't seem to be seriously injured. Who is this person? The old man in the black robe coughed as he bent over. Red blood dripped from the gaps between his fingers as he covered his mouth. When he turned his face and looked at Xia Pingan with bloodshot eyes, Xia Pingan felt goosebumps all over his body. Xia Pingan didn't look at the old man in the eyes. He lowered his head silently. That glance just now made Xia Pingan's heart skip a beat. He felt that the old man's eyes were too fierce. Elder Tang, this person is the one who entered Wan Song Plain tonight to fish in troubled waters. I'm going to send him to the criminal law hall for punishment, Elder Lu said. The old man called Elder Tang sized up Xia Pingan again before saying, I'll go back to the city, to report to the family head. After saying that, the old man in the black robe rose into the air and instantly disappeared in the northeast direction. I'll go back with Elder Tang. I'll leave the other teams here to Elder Lu, the elder in the blue robe said as he also rose into the air and flew towards the northeast direction. After the two people left, Elder Lu's expression slowly recovered. He glanced at Xia Pingan before saying to the four young men, You guys escort him back to Wansong City first. I'll patrol this place again in case someone takes the opportunity to make trouble and affect the prestige of Tang family, Elder Lu said as he waved his sleeve. A string of flames flew out from his side and landed on the corpses in the valley. Those corpses were immediately set ablaze and turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Then, Elder Lu also left in another direction. Xia Pingan had been observing the situation in the surrounding forest with his remote vision ability. When the seven-colored light and the golden door appeared in the sky, there was indeed some movement in the surrounding forest. He could feel more than one divine power aura rapidly approaching the place where the seven-colored light appeared. However, after the subsequent battle, the seven-colored light and the door in the sky disappeared, and the divine power aura in the nearby forest also dispersed. Let's go too. The dark-faced youth called Tang Long grabbed Xia Pingan and carried him on his shoulder. He then said to the others. The four of them didn't stay in the valley any longer as they rushed towards the northeast with Xia Pingan. Although the four of them couldn't fly, their running speed on the ground was also incredibly fast. It was as if they had mastered the legendary lightness skill. They could leap over eaves, vault over walls, and cross mountains and rivers. With one stride, they were more than 10 meters away. They ran on the ground as fast as lightning. They could cross over 7 or 8 meters high cliffs and rivers that were more than 10 meters wide. Their speed was at least twice as fast as Xia Pingan's current running speed. The most amazing thing was that the four of them, 2 men and 2 women, didn't feel tired at all. Xia Pingan's weight was not light, but being carried by the black-faced youth, it did not affect that person's speed at all. After running for more than an hour in the forest full of tall pine trees, the sky gradually brightened and a red sun appeared on the eastern horizon. Being carried by someone, Xia Pingan couldn't move. He could only feel the strong wind blowing against his face. Occasionally, branches and leaves would brush past his head and face. After running for more than an hour, Xia Pingan's hair was disheveled and he looked pitiful. Ahem, can you tell me which province and which region is Dawan City? Xia Pingan asked while being carried by someone. You came to our Tang family's Dawan City to look for treasures, but you don't know where Dawan City is? Tang Long, who was carrying Xia Pingan, asked. I didn't mean to offend the Tang family. My mind is blank now. Except for my name, I can't remember anything else. I even forgot where I came from. Xia Pingan sighed. This is the consequence of being affected by the soul-losing skill. The soul-losing skill will make you forget a lot of things. It's said that some seriously affected people will become idiot. Their intelligence will be as low as that of a 7 or 8-year-old child. You're lucky that you can still remember your name, a woman said. This guy is really lucky. So many people have died in Dawan City these days. Many of them died before even touching the door of the secret treasure of Void. He's lucky that he's still alive. In fact, I hate dissolute summoners like you the most. You're not good enough, but you always want to get some secret treasures. If there's really something good, it won't be your turn. Why don't you just learn from your master and practice? Another man said. Another woman sighed as she looked at Xia Pingan sympathetically. Remember, This is the southern territory of the Gold Moon continent. Hearing this answer, Xia Pingan was shocked. This was not the Wood Flood Dragon continent, but the Gold Moon continent. The distance between the Gold Moon continent and the Wood Flood Dragon continent was more than hundreds of millions of miles. It seemed that none of the previous batches of people who participated in the Heavens Patching Plan had set foot in the Gold Moon continent. I wonder how Yin Duo and the others are doing. When will we meet again? Xia Pingan became silent. I can only rely on myself here. At noon, a huge city on the plain appeared in front of Xia Pingan. It was a city with a bizarre style. Looking from afar, Zhang Tai could see the tall chimneys in the factory area around the city. Besides chimneys, there were many tall steeples in the city that were as eye-catching as those chimneys. Around those tall spires, there were all kinds of buildings densely packed together. In this world, summoners with status and strength would build their own summoner tower, and the summoner tower would become one of the symbols of summoners. Xia Pingan knew this before, and seeing so many summoner towers in a city with his own eyes still gave him a shocking feeling. The sky of this world was very blue, even with those tall chimneys standing erect. Under the blue sky and white clouds, there were a few airships floating in the sky. This scene was filled with a strange beauty. What made Xia Pingan feel even more incredulous was that he saw grasshoppers. They were huge locusts that were 3 to 4 meters long. Some of the locusts were emerald green, while others were slightly yellow or yellowish-brown. Those locusts had reins on their heads and saddle-like seats on their back. Many people were riding on the locusts as they hurried on their journey. Those grasshoppers ran on the ground as if they were flying. From time to time, they would jump up into the air and spread their wings. They would glide for hundreds of meters in the air, land on the ground, and then fly up again. Their speed was faster than that of a car, and they could adapt to any terrain. When they encountered a river that was dozens of meters wide, those grasshoppers did not walk on the bridge. Instead, they directly jumped up from the ground and flew across in the air. Those who sat on the grasshoppers' backs all rode those grasshoppers as if they were riding horses. They held the reins in their hands and looked calm. Those grasshoppers that were more than 3 meters long could only seat one person. Some grasshoppers that were more than 4 meters long could even seat 2 people. There were also grasshoppers that didn't jump or jump. They walked obediently on the ground, pulling a carriage behind them. The carriage was filled with various fruits and vegetables. The person riding the grasshopper wore a straw hat and was dressed casually. He was dressed like a farmer. Grasshoppers were the means of transportation for most people in Dawan City. Apart from grasshoppers, there were few four-wheeled vehicles on the road. Besides grasshoppers, there were also huge dragonflies in the sky. The dragonflies were like helicopters, buzzing as they flew across the sky one by one. Almost all of the dragonflies had people sitting on their back. There was no city wall in this city. However, there was a group of huge castles in the center of the city. There was a huge Tang character on the city wall at the entrance of the castles, which was as same as that of the Fire Country. The 4 disciples of the Tang clan led Xia Pingan through the city. Xia Pingan looked at the buildings in the city, and he was dazzled by the locusts and dragonflies. There were factories, schools and shops in this city. Xia Pingan even saw a bustling vegetable market. Some people were quarreling in the vegetable market. Their faces and ears turned red. Policemen on the street were blowing whistles to direct traffic. Some policemen were chasing after thieves. Thieves were fleeing in the crowd on the street. In the blink of an eye, they had entered alleys. The city was full of life. If one didn't look at those grasshoppers and large dragonflies, this city felt like a big European city in the 18th and 19th centuries. As for the grasshoppers that entered the city, they were tied to the side of the road one by one like horses. There were even rail cars in the city. The liveliness of Dawan City was beyond Xia Pingan's imagination. Xia Pingan, who was carried by someone, also attracted a lot of attention along the way. Chapter 163. This man has trespassed into our Tang family's Pine Plain. Elder Lu asked me to bring him back to the criminal law hall. After bringing Xia Pingan to the Tang family's castle, the black-faced youth Tang Long directly came to the criminal law hall. Until now, Xia Pingan's hands were still tied up. Is it those dissolute summoners again? A middle-aged man with a mustache walked over from the criminal law hall and sized up Xia Pingan from head to toe. We've caught a lot of such people in the city these days. Do you have any special instructions from Elder Lu? No special instructions. Well, I see. Leave it to us. The man with the mustache smiled and waved his hand. Two disciples of the criminal law hall walked over with two silver-white strange metal rings in their hands. There were also chains in the metal rings, similar to handcuffs. They directly wrapped around Xia Pingan's wrists and locked them in place with a kacha sound. As soon as the metal rings were locked, Xia Pingan felt that his divine strength and physical strength were completely confined. He could not exert any strength at all. Even the divine strength in the secret mandala seemed to have been frozen. Tang Long waved his hand, and the rope that bound Xia Pingan flew back to his hand. This person's body has been integrated with a space teleportation equipment. There are weapons in it. We have to search it. Don't let him take advantage of any loopholes. The man waved his hand as he ordered the two disciples of the criminal law hall, take him through the empty gate and put him in prison. Yes. Xia Pingan was then escorted by the two disciples of the criminal law hall towards a room in the criminal law hall. After that, they came to a spacious room. The room was a bit strange. There was only a 2-meter-high metal arch in the middle of the room. The two disciples of the criminal law hall escorted Xia Pingan through the metal arch. The moment he passed through the metal door, Xia Pingan felt as if he had entered a spatial crack once again. His entire body felt weightless for an instant. The things he had placed in the spatial warehouse all shook and burst out of the spatial warehouse, crashing onto the ground. Xia Pingan didn't feel bad about losing those things at all. However, the various methods used to deal with summoners in this world were an eye-opener for Xia Pingan. Is this guy selling weapons? Why does he have so many things on him? At the sight of the broken sabers, swords, guns and ammunition, the two disciples of the criminal law hall who escorted Xia Pingan were also stunned. One disciple of the criminal law hall fiddled with the things on the ground with his foot as he curled his lips in disdain. They're all common goods. They don't even have any celestial devices. That's enough. These dissolute summoners are all poor bastards. How could they have anything good? Put him in jail. The two people escorted Xia Pingan out of the room and through the corridor to another place. After that, they went underground and arrived at the prison of the Tang clan. After that, they threw Xia Pingan into a huge cell. There were already more than 20 people in the cell. They were of all shapes and sizes. All of them were standing lazily in the cell, wearing silver bracelets on their hands. The only light in the cell came from a ventilation window at the top. Ha! Here comes another unlucky guy. Some people sneered. After throwing Xia Pingan in, the door of the cell was closed. Xia Pingan glanced around the room and found a place to sit against the wall. The prison cell looked clean and wasn't filthy. It was much better than Xia Pingan's expectations of a water dungeon filled with maggots and dead rat. Brat, where were you caught from? A guy who had not shaved for more than half a month asked Xia Pingan. He was sitting beside Xia Pingan. Wan Song Yuan. Xia Pingan replied. Ah, Wan Song Yuan. Once they heard that Xia Pingan was captured from Wansong Plain, the people in the prison cell immediately became interested, and almost all of them gathered around. Come on, what's the situation in Wan Song Yuan? Has the secret treasure of void in Wan Song Yuan appeared? Have any powerhouses arrived? The people who gathered around started to ask questions at the same time. Xia Pingan did not hide anything and told them everything that he had seen. The Tang family has indeed been defeated, ha ha. Someone slapped his thigh and laughed. I knew it. With the Tang family's ability, how could they have taken the secret treasure of void in Wansongyuan? Even if the Tang family could capture us, they would still be defeated by a real powerhouse. I wonder who the person who defeated the Tang family is. How could he summon the Abyss Dragon? He must be at least at the Four-Sun realm. By the way, how did you get in here? Xia Pingon asked. Damn it, I heard that the secret treasure of void appeared in Wansongyuan and wanted to try my luck. I didn't expect to be caught by the Tang family's patrol team as soon as I arrived in Wan City. A guy with disheveled hair said bitterly. Me too. The group of people in the cell cursed. Looking at the group of people in the cell, Xia Pingon shook his head inwardly. If these guys had gone to Wansongyuan, they wouldn't have gotten a share of the secret treasure of void. Perhaps they would already be corpses. Since there was nothing to do in the cell, Xia Pingon chatted with these people and learned a lot of useful information from them. Little by little, the information gave Xia Pingon a better understanding of the situation in the southern region of the Golden Moon continent. The Tang family had been rooted in the southern region of the Golden Moon continent for hundreds of years, but it was only a small family that owned only one city. There were many big and small family forces in the southern region of the Golden Moon continent, but these forces were sandwiched between several large forces. The Devil Wolf Empire of the Devil Wolf clan and the Devil Kingdom of Chaos were further south and southwest of the southern region of the Golden Moon continent. The Divine Kingdoms of the Dark War God sect and the Moon God sect were located in the north and northwest of the southern region of the Golden Moon continent. A divine kingdom could have many divine kingdoms, but a divine kingdom could only have one divine church. A divine church was a force left behind by the god of this world. When Xia Pingon heard about the Dark War God sect, his heart skipped a beat. This was because the Dark War God sect was his original target. The Dark War God sect was one of the largest human forces in Yuanqiu. Relying on one person and dozens of people to find and destroy the Dark Pagoda was too weak. If he could grasp the power of the Divine Church and complete this task on a large platform, it would be a different scene. At night, in the secret chamber of the Tang family. The Tang family's patriarch and 4 elders were here. The Tang family had failed in the competition for the void treasure in the Pine Plains. As the few people in charge of the Tang family, they naturally had to review the matter here. The result of the review was that the Tang family had not made any mistakes since the discovery of the void treasure. The only reason for the failure was that the Tang family was still too weak. They were only one step behind when facing a powerful dragon, and the meat of the Tang family was snatched away from under their noses. They couldn't blame others for their lack of strength. However, it was not what a family should do to not fight for the void treasure. Fortunately, the Tang family didn't lose much strength this time. They only sacrificed 2 family disciples, and several family disciples were injured. The few elders who fought were slightly injured and would recover in a few days. The Tang family had already sent the information and appearance of the person who robbed the secret treasure of the void to the 2 holy kingdoms in the north through their own connections. Therefore, the Tang family could send some envious and capable masters to deal with him. This could be regarded as an indirect revenge for the Tang family. It's over. Although the rogue summoners who were caught and locked up in the criminal law hall are not strong, they know many people. Those rogue summoners have a lot of connections. Killing them will cause the Tang family to be criticized and leave a ruthless reputation for the Tang family. It will cause a lot of trouble for the Tang family disciples who go out in the future. Lock them up for a few days and let them go after teaching them a lesson. The Tang family's patriarch, Tang Xiao, finally said. Those rogue summoners were just small fries. They couldn't be squeezed out of them and didn't commit any major crimes. Killing them wouldn't help the situation and would cause some trouble if people criticized them. Therefore, the most appropriate method was to lock them up for a few days and let them go. Although the rogue summoner called Xia Pingan, whom I asked Tang Long to catch from the Wansong Plains, isn't strong and isn't even at the One Sun realm, he can use the perfect grade Requiem banner and even fuse with a spatial equipment. When I saw him earlier, he seemed to have been hit by the soulless spell. Everything on him had been taken away, including his clothes, and he was wearing the clothes of the dead. He took the things of the dead and even calmed the souls of the dead. He shouldn't be an ordinary person to be able to use the perfect grade Requiem banner. The person who used the soulless spell to rob him probably knows his background and didn't dare to offend him, so he left him alive. If such a person dies in the hands of our Tang family, it will indeed be very troublesome. Elder Lu said. To be able to use the perfect grade Requiem banner and fuse with a spatial equipment, he must have a master or family background, taking the things of the dead and calming the souls of the dead. This behavior is indeed like that of a disciple of a large family with strict family rules. Tang Xiao stroked his beard and nodded lightly. Many disciples of large families will go around to gain experience as rogue summoners when they reach adulthood. Elder Lu is indeed prudent. After a few days, let the criminal law hall release that person, lest he makes unnecessary enemies for the Tang family. Yes. As Elder Lu and Tang Xiao spoke, they didn't notice that the other Tang family elder, who had been coughing just now in the conference room, lowered his gaze when he heard this. A strange look flashed across his eyes. Xia Pingan was locked up in the cell for half a month. Half a month later, Xia Pingan was taken out of the cell and interrogated in the Tang family's criminal law hall. Because he had trespassed into the Tang family's territory without permission, the facts were irrefutable. According to the Tang family's laws, those who trespassed into the Tang family's territory would be locked up for half a month and punished slightly. The people from the Tang family's criminal law hall took out something and had Xia Pingan sign and admit his actions. After that, they released Xia Pingan. The Tang family didn't keep a single piece of the scrap metal that Xia Pingan had picked up in the territory. They were quite particular about doing things and returned all of it to him. Walking out of the Tang family's castle alone, Xia Pingan raised his head and narrowed his eyes to look at the sun in the sky. He then sniffed at the clothes on his body that were already whooshing and infested with lice. Finally, he glanced at the Tang family's castle before turning around and striding toward the pawnshop in the city. However, just as he walked a few streets, Xia Pingan's heart trembled and the hairs on his neck stood on end. The scorching sun hung high above his head and the streets were bustling with activity. A few large grasshoppers hopped past him. When the surrounding people saw that Xia Pingan was a little unkempt, they all avoided him in disdain. However, Xia Pingan knew that he was being watched. Because he had the ability to sense things from afar, his senses were also abnormally sharp. The moment he was being watched, he would feel it. The hairs on his neck stood on end. The person who was watching him was far stronger than him and had ill intentions towards him. Xia Pingan's footsteps were normal on the streets, but in his heart, all sorts of thoughts were rapidly running through his mind. Chapter 164. Sir, are you really going to pawn these things? The shopkeeper of the pawn shop looked at Xia Pingan through the window, as if he was looking at a robber. That's right. How could a normal person take out so many things at once? Those things looked like they belonged to murderers and robbers. Especially those gold headdresses, they looked like they were obtained through shady means. Since Xia Pingan took out those sabers, swords, guns, bullets and gold headdresses from his space warehouse, 2 security guards of the pawn shop silently appeared in the business hall. Their 4 eyes were fixed on Xia Pingan. One of the security guards had obvious waves of divine power, which meant that he was trying to tell Xia Pingan, "Brother, don't try anything funny. I'm also here to help you." There was probably no such thing as gun control in Dawan City. Just now, Xia Pingan had seen several gun shops on the way here. Those shops sold gunpowder, guns and ammunition of various length. There were also many shops selling cold weapons. Many pedestrians on the street carried sabers and guns. Yes, pawn them all. Xia Pingan said directly. Shopkeeper, name your price. These sabers, swords and pistols are a bit worn out. Their color is not very good. These gold headdresses can only be used by summoners. I have to melt them again. How about 46 gold coins? The shopkeeper stared at Xia Pingan with his small eyes. He had already decided that if Xia Pingan bargained, he could persuade him to add 2 more gold coins. Okay, 46 gold coins it is. Xia Pingan said directly, not bothering to haggle. There were several types of human currencies in this world. Gold coins, silver coins, and copper coins. These 3 types of currencies were called agreement currencies. They were the currency system agreed upon by all the banks in this world. The agreement was that the purity and weight of these 3 types of currencies were exactly the same. Although the currency patterns were different, the purity and weight of these 3 types of currencies were exactly the same. Therefore, it was convenient for trade. The shopkeeper took out 46 gold coins from behind the counter and gave them to Xia Pingan. Xia Pingan weighed them in his hand. Each gold coin weighed more than 50 grams. On some gold coins, there were images of the castles of the Tang family and Dawan City. On some gold coins, there were images of a woman with 2 full moons above her head. The latter was the image of the moon goddess. Xia Pingan reached out his hand and swept all the gold coins into his space teleportation equipment. Then, Xia Pingan directly left the pawnshop. The moment he walked out, Xia Pingan felt that he was being stared at. Therefore, he kept his composure. He took the money and continued to move on to the next place. This time, Xia Pingan wore clothes. On the street, he saw the puppet models in various clothes and a pair of scissors on the signboard. It was a ready-made clothing store. Xia Pingan chose a large ready-made clothing store. After taking a look around, he bought a lot of clothes. After exiting the ready-made clothing store, Xia Pingan went to a bathhouse in the downtown. When he came out of the bathhouse, it was already noon. Xia Pingan looked refreshed from head to toe. After that, Xia Pingan went to a restaurant in the city. After having lunch, he went straight to the train station of Dawan City. He bought a train that was about to leave Dawan City. Without saying anything, he got on the train at the station and squeezed into the crowded train carriage. He took the train and left Dawan City. After boarding the train, the feeling of being stared at disappeared for a short while. However, it didn't take long for it to return. Xia Pingan stared at the people boarding the train. There were all kinds of people on the train. There were both men and women. He couldn't tell who was watching him. This meant that the strength of the person who was watching him was far beyond his imagination. Even if the person was watching him, he wouldn't be able to detect it. The train slowly left the platform and headed north. The train sped along the tracks, its speed gradually reaching over 80 kilometers per hour. The destination of the train was the divine nation of the Moon God sect in the north. It would pass by more than 10 territories and cities of the Moon God sect along the way. It would take more than 20 days to travel from Dawan City to the divine nation of the Moon God sect. Ticket check, ticket check. The attendant on the train began to check the tickets. After checking the tickets, the peddlers selling tea, melon seeds, and cigarettes came and hawked along the train. Xia Pingan spent a silver coin to buy a cup of tea. The tea on the train wasn't cheap. However, he didn't have to pay to refill the tea at any time. If he drank too much tea, he would naturally have to go to the toilet. There was a toilet on the train. Before the sky turned dark, Xia Pingan went to the toilet twice. Each time, he would come back in 2 or 3 minutes. The train sped along. Before he knew it, the sky had turned dark. Outside the train was an endless wilderness and hills. After having dinner in the restaurant, Xia Pingan returned to his seat. After sitting for a while, he got up and went to the toilet again. This time, as soon as he entered the toilet of the train, Xia Pingan closed the door and opened the window of the toilet. Then, he slipped out of the window of the speeding train like a slippery loach. He leaped out of the train and landed in the wilderness outside. Then, he laid down on the weeds that were half the height of a person outside the train track. As soon as the train left, Xia Pingan got up and ran towards the mountains in the distance. His figure disappeared into the darkness in the blink of an eye. 5 minutes later, a skinny figure wearing a long black robe with a ferocious bullhead mask on his face appeared at the spot where Xia Pingan had jumped off the train. His mouth emitted a low and deep roar as the eyes behind the mask flashed with a fierce light. Immediately, he chased in the direction where Xia Pingan had disappeared with a lightning-like speed. The night was getting darker. Several hours later, in a valley in the endless wilderness, the man wearing a black robe and an ox-head mask finally discovered Xia Pingan's rapidly escaping figure. "Boy, you're really cunning. You actually found out that I was watching you. Let's see where you're going to run to." The figure wearing a black robe descended from the sky. His voice was as low as a ghost's howl. He stopped in front of Xia Pingan and pointed at Xia Pingan. A black smoke, like a rope, flew towards Xia Pingan. Xia Pingan, who was running, stopped and smiled at the figure wearing a black robe. He was not nervous at all. Just as the figure wearing a black robe felt a little strange, the black smoke-like rope touched Xia Pingan. Xia Pingan's figure shook a little, then turned into smoke and dispersed. Illusion, playing with the warlord with the fire beacon. The figure wearing a black robe suddenly roared. He did not expect that after chasing for half the night, he would be played by a boy in the end. He had lost a lot of face. The point was that he had been distracted by the illusion for such a long time. That boy had already escaped to God knows where. The figure wearing a black robe flew into the air and scanned the surroundings. Under the night sky, the wilderness was vast and there were hills everywhere. There was not a single person to be found. When Xia Pingan's illusion was broken, Xia Pingan, who was hiding in a tree hole in the woods 50 miles away, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes flashed with astonishment. There was a mysterious connection between the summoner and the illusion. Not only could Xia Pingan control the direction of movement of the illusory figure, but he could also sense what the illusory figure saw and heard. Although the figure wearing a black robe and a bull's head and a devil's face mask did not show his face, Xia Pingan immediately thought of the black-robed elder of the Tang clan. Why would that elder of the Tang clan want to harm him? He had only met him once, and there were no other grievances between them. Xia Pingan did not know the reason behind this, but he was clear that wolves did not need the consent and understanding of the sheep to eat them. Everything in this world was like this. Under the protection of the green protective boundary, Xia Pingan hid in the tree hole for 5 days. After 5 days, after confirming that the elder of the Tang clan had left, Xia Pingan drilled out of the tree hole. After identifying the direction, he rushed towards the north. Chapter 165. 3 months later, in Shangjing City, the capital of Shang Country in Gold Moon Continent, the slanting wind and drizzle covered Shangjing City, causing peach blossoms on the banks of Chinan River to fall into the river, almost dyeing the river pink. Chinan River flowed all the way to the east. After bypassing the north of Shangjing City like a moat, it went straight to the sea. Over 300 miles to the east of Shangjing City was the sea, which was also the Donggang district of Shangjing City. Over half of the goods, money and grains that were transported from the south of Shang Country to Shangjing City were transported to the Donggang district by sea. Needless to say, the Donggang district of Shangjing City was prosperous. On the number 7 pier of the Donggang district, a huge cruise ship with 3 huge chimneys and a length of over 200 m slowly approached the shore with the sound of the steam whistle. As this huge cruise ship approached the shore, the passengers who had stayed on the cruise ship for over half a month got off the ship one after another in the drizzle with large and small bags. For many people, Shangjing City was a place of dreams. It was the capital of Shang country, the seat of the Dark Battle God Church in Gold Moon Continent. It was the most prosperous and largest city in Gold Moon Continent with over 10 million residents. It seemed that as long as a person came here, he or she would be related to numerous wealth, reputation, status, prosperity, and those big figures who influence the pattern of all countries. In Shangjing City, numerous people came here every day to seek for gold. Numerous people expected to soar into the sky and amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Ping-un, my young friend, the camp of the Judgment Army of Dark Battle God Church is in Phoenix Feather Mountain in the north of Shangjing City. It's a long way from here to Phoenix Feather Mountain. I wish you a bright future as an adjudicator in Shangjing City. If you're free, you can come to Wanli Bookstore in the East Avenue of Shangjing City to have tea and play chess with me on the cruise ship. A well-dressed old man wearing a top hat, gold-rimmed glasses, and a cane in his hand was bidding farewell to Xia Pingan. This old man was Xia Pingan's roommate on the cruise ship. Xia Pingan stayed in a two-person economy cabin on the cruise ship, and this old man was the other guest in the cabin. The old man's surname was Jing and his name was Jing Yuxing. He was a native of Shangjing City and opened a small bookstore in Shangjing City. Some time ago, the old man went to Jianzhou to visit a friend. When he came back, he took this cruise ship and stayed in the same room as Xia Pingan. These days on the cruise ship, when the old man was bored, he would play chess with Xia Pingan and chat. After more than half a month, they got along very well. Thank you, Elder Jing. After I settle down, I will find time to play chess and drink tea with you, Xia Pingan said to the old man with a smile. In Xia Pingan's impression of this old man, although he was a bookstore owner, he spoke well and was knowledgeable. For half a month, Xia Pingan learned a lot just by chatting with this old man. Ha ha ha, well, that's a deal. Elder Jing revealed a smile as his face turned a bit solemn. He then said earnestly, before leaving, this old man has one more word for you. Shangjing City is the most prosperous and dangerous place in Gold Moon Continent. As you're new here, even if you're ambitious, you'd better be careful. Do you know why the locals in Shangjing City don't eat the fish in Qinan River? Why? Elder Jing pointed at Qinan River not far away and sighed. Qinan River would be cleaned every 10 years. God knows how many ships' worth of corpses would be cleaned each time. Those corpses were either tied up with iron chains, beheaded, broken bones, broken tendons, or even black bones. Who would eat the fishes from this river? Thanks for your advice, Elder Jing. I will be careful, Xia Pingan said seriously. If that's the case, let's part ways here. Elder Jing bade farewell to Xia Pingan. After that, he drew out a black oilcloth umbrella from his suitcase. After opening the umbrella, he carried the suitcase and went down the stairs on the deck, disappearing into the crowd below. Elder Jing was not young. However, he was very vigorous and didn't look old at all. Even with a suitcase in hand, he still straightened his back. Seeing Elder Jing leaving, Xia Pingan also carried his suitcase and got off the ship in the crowd. The leather suitcase was bought by Xia Pingan before. It was a brown leather suitcase, which was quite normal. People who traveled long distances did not carry a leather suitcase with them. It was too conspicuous to walk in the crowd. Many people would look at them curiously, and if they carried a leather suitcase, they would look much more ordinary. The drizzle sprinkled on Xia Pingan's face, making him a bit cold. Walking towards the wharf in the crowd, Xia Pingan felt that he had returned to the days when he drifted in Beijing. It was too similar. In his previous life, he drifted in Beijing to study and make a name for himself. This time, he came to Shangjing City for the same purpose, Shangjing City of the Shang dynasty. It was the gathering place of resources, information, power, and experts in the Golden Moon continent. At the same time, it also had the largest national library and national archives in the Golden Moon continent. For a summoner, the fastest place to cultivate was not the deep mountains or old forests, but the bustling city in front of him. As long as he could make a name for himself in this city, the cultivation resources he could obtain would definitely be incomparable to other places. At the same time, it was also the most likely place to find clues about the Dark Tower. The Dark Battle God religion's defense force was called the Judgment Army. Those who could join the Judgment Army must be summoners. Furthermore, the Judgment Army recruited summoners from outside the Great Zhou dynasty. As long as they were below the One Sun realm, they could come here to try and see if they could join the Judgment Army. Summoners who joined the Judgment Army were all 1 in 100. Once they joined the Judgment Army, they would become a member of the Dark Battle God religion's Judgment Army. Then, they would have found their organization. However, it was said that it was very difficult to join the Judgment Army, and the conditions were harsh. The Judgment Army's summoners were almost 1 in 100. They chose the strongest of the strong and the best of the best. Xia Pingan followed the crowd that got off the boat and left the dock. After the bustling crowd walked out of the dock, they came to the street outside the dock. On the street, rows of rickshaws were parked by the roadside. Those rickshaws were almost identical to rickshaws. When they saw people coming out, those rickshaws pulled the rickshaws and ran over to pick up the customers. In addition to the rickshaws, Xia Pingan saw four-wheeled carriages, small cars, and trolley cars on the streets of the city. The large grasshoppers that he had seen in Dawan City previously were nowhere to be seen here. When the rickshaws rushed over, the people from the various broker houses waiting outside the dock also held up all kinds of recruitment signs outside. They were looking for nannies, maids, manservants, apprentices, bodyguards, and so on. When they saw a slightly attractive young woman carrying things out of the exit, a large group of broker house employees holding up recruitment signs for maids and nannies rushed over and began to promise all kinds of conditions. Some beggars and children selling newspapers also rushed over. The exit was a bit chaotic for a moment. The scene in front of him was somewhat similar to that of Shanghai in the old society. Xia Pingan, who was squeezing in the crowd, had just taken a few steps when he felt two chopsticks quickly reaching into his clothes pocket from the side. P.S. Thank you for your valuable advice. Tiger saw it. I've been a bit jammed these days, so the update time is a bit irregular. Please forgive me. I'm also here to reflect on myself. From tomorrow onwards, Tiger and everyone agreed that the daily update time would be fixed from 7:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. every day. All the updated chapters would be released during this time period. If the chapters were released after this time period, they would have to be updated. If they were not released after this time period, they would have to ask for leave from everyone for that day. I'll update today. Thank you, everyone. Chapter 166. Xia Pingan reached out his hand and caught a wrist. He turned his head and saw a 14 or 15-year-old boy wearing a gray felt hat and clothes that were still wet from the rain. The boy's face was a little thin, and he was glaring at him with a ferocious look, without a trace of fear. The two chopsticks in the boy's hands had already fallen to the ground. Damn it, what are you doing? Let go. The boy was not only unafraid, but also threatened fiercely. Xia Pingan slightly tightened his grip, and the boy's face showed a trace of pain, but there was also a trace of cunning hidden in the pain. Ah! The boy screamed, with a strong sense of performance, and then suddenly fell to the ground full of dirty water, twitching all over. The surrounding people who had just arrived in Shangjing were frightened and scattered at once. At the same time, more than 10 people surrounded Xia Pingan. They were all men in their teens or 20s. Some of them were wearing felt hats, while others were wearing yellow vests used to help people carry luggage outside the port. They quickly surrounded Xia Pingan and stared at him with a ferocious look. Many of them put their hands in their pockets, which were bulging and looked like they were carrying sharp weapons. Xiao Pai, what's wrong with you? A man in his 20s with a flat face, with a pair of small eyes and eyebrows that were so light that they could not be seen, walked out of the crowd and asked loudly in a rough voice, "Brother Hong, I just came over to ask him if he wanted me to bring my luggage. I didn't expect him to hit me. Ouch, ouch, it hurts." The young man on the ground screamed and twitched on the ground as if he was performing. "Friend, we brothers are just doing hard work to make a living here. We help people carry their luggage to earn some hard-earned money. Don't you think it's too much to bully a kid like this?" The young man called Brother Hong looked coldly at Xia Pingan and took 2 steps forward. "It's fine if you don't want our service, but why did you hit us?" "That's right, why did you hit us? Damn it, how dare you bully us? Be careful not to stab you to death. Beat him to death, beat him to death." The surrounding people gathered and stared fiercely at Xia Pingan. Some people were shouting and threatening, and a few people stared at the luggage in Xia Pingan's hand. Xia Pingan looked down at Xiao Pai, who had fallen to the ground. He saw that when Xiao Pai twitched, he had kicked the 2 wooden chopsticks that fell to the ground into the crowd beside him. The people in the crowd kicked the chopsticks, and in the blink of an eye, the 2 chopsticks were kicked away and disappeared without a trace. This was a group crime with a clear division of labor. Once the theft failed and was discovered, they would threaten and blackmail. The people in front of him were already very familiar with this. The public security and the environment. Seeing that Xia Pingan didn't say anything and just looked around, those people who gathered around became emboldened at once. Brother Hong and several people in the crowd gave each other a look, and the surrounding crowd gathered around. It was noisy. "Beat him," some people in the crowd encouraged. In the chaos, the surrounding people blocked the view of the people outside. A few hands grabbed Xia Pingan's luggage with sharp blades in their hands. Some hands directly grabbed Xia Pingan, as if they were going to search him. Some hands turned into fists, some had half a brick or a wooden stick. They were going to hit Xia Pingan's head and body. A few younger teenagers sneaked out of the crowd and wanted to hold Xia Pingan's hand. Xiao Pai, who was twitching on the ground, stopped twitching at this time. With a vicious smile, he wanted to hold Xia Pingan's leg. The scene in front of them was like a group of hyenas besieging a lion. In such a situation, ordinary people would find it difficult to deal with other than being beaten and robbed. However, those people might be able to cooperate closely like the hyenas, but Xia Pingan was not as easy to deal with as a lion. Xia Pingan's face was expressionless. He just picked up his suitcase and swung it around. The suitcase was knocked away. Fists, bricks, wooden sticks, hands, bodies, the people who surrounded him all rolled over in pain and fell to the ground. Brother Hong's head was hit by the suitcase. He was suddenly dizzy and flew 2 meters away. "Io, Io, someone hit someone, someone hit someone," those people shouted together. Seeing that Xia Pingan was so brave and had such amazing strength in his hands, those people who fell to the ground didn't dare to rush over for a while. Beep, beep. A policeman in a black uniform with a baton in his hand finally appeared when those people were calling for him. "What are you doing? What are you doing? Who hit someone?" The policeman was fat and walked over noisily. As soon as he came over, he asked loudly with a cold face, "Officer, he hit someone." Brother Hong, who fell to the ground, and a group of people who were screaming in pain all pointed at Xia Pingan. "Officer, they are stealing things here, robbing things and even hitting people. Aren't you going to do anything about it?" Xia Pingan said to the policeman, "I didn't see what you said. They said you hit someone, so many people saw it." The policeman walked directly to Xia Pingan with a stern face and a baton in his hand. The bricks on the ground, wooden sticks, and blades on their bodies are evidence. You'll know when you search. Hearing Xia Pingan's words, the policeman's face became even colder. His pair of urinary eyes stared at Xia Pingan with an unfriendly gaze, and he directly scolded, "Do I need you to teach me how to handle a case? If you have anything to say, say it with me in the police station." As he spoke, The policeman took out the handcuffs on his waist and was about to handcuff Xia Pingan. Xia Pingan finally understood why these thieves and blackmailers were so rampant in the dock area. It turned out that they had a protective umbrella, a nest of snakes and rat. When he saw the policeman take out the handcuffs to handcuff him, he took a step back and avoided it. The policeman's face changed slightly. "Damn, you dare to arrest me? Do you know who I am?" Xia Pingan blinked his eyes and suddenly asked the policeman a question. The policeman was stunned. "Who are you?" "I'm not telling you." Xia Pingan smiled faintly. The policeman's face changed and he tried to grab Xia Pingan again. Xia Pingan's hand moved like lightning and grabbed the policeman's handcuff. At the same time, he grabbed the policeman's wrist. The policeman staggered and was involuntarily dragged by Xia Pingan to a nearby lamppost. Xia Pingan's hand moved too fast. With two cracking sounds, the policeman was still in a daze. Before he could react, Xia Pingan had already roasted him with his hands around the lamppost. Not only that, Xia Pingan also tore off the whistle on his neck and the handcuff key on his belt. "You dare to resist arrest, quickly, quickly let me go!" the policeman screamed. His voice was stern, but at the same time, he was extremely embarrassed. As a policeman, he was actually handcuffed in front of so many people. Furthermore, he was even hugging a lamppost. This was a great loss of face. "It's because of trash policemen like you that these people dare to commit crimes here." Xia Pingan waved his hand and threw the whistle and handcuff key in his hand into the gap of the sewer nearby. "Someone come quickly, someone come quickly," the policeman yelled. Before anyone could surround him, Xia Pingan had already picked up his suitcase and ran away. In the blink of an eye, he ran hundreds of meters in the drizzle. After turning a corner, he disappeared from everyone's sight. Brother Hong and the rest who were lying on the ground did not react. They did not expect Xia Pingan to run. When they got up one by one and chased after him for a few steps, he was already nowhere to be seen. "You bastards, don't you have any brains? Quickly find the key and unlock my handcuffs." The policeman who was handcuffed to the lamppost yelled in exasperation. Brother Hong and the rest hurriedly turned around and opened the sewer cover in a flurry, trying to find the key. However, it was raining today and the water in the sewer was a bit rapid. The key and whistle thrown by Xia Pingan into the sewer were washed away by the water and could not be seen anymore. The onlookers at the exit of the pier felt like they were watching a funny farce. The policeman was handcuffed, and a group of gangsters were saving the policeman. Policemen and civilians were really a family. Not far away, a black four-wheeled carriage was parked by the roadside. At the back of the carriage, Elder Jing looked at what was happening through the dark glass window. When he saw Xia Pingan's figure disappear at the corner of the street, Elder Jing, who was sitting in the carriage, smiled. He pulled up the curtain of the carriage window and gently knocked on a wooden board in the carriage with his cane. "Let's go, Jia." The coachman, who was wearing a raincoat, shook the reins lightly, and the black four-wheeled carriage started to move. Xia Pingan moved very fast. After turning the corner and seeing that nobody was chasing after him, Xia Pingan directly stopped a four-wheeled carriage that had just got off. Four-wheeled carriages were used to carry passengers and pull people in Shangjing City. The headlights in front of the carriage were yellow, which was very easy to distinguish. The coachmen were wearing raincoats, bamboo hats and rain hat. They sat in front of the carriage and held the reins like anglers sitting alone in the cold river. The camp of the Judgment Army. Although the road from the East Harbor to the camp of the Judgment Army in the north was smooth, it was still over 500 miles away. It would take almost one day for this carriage to run. Additionally, the weather was bad today, and it was a long journey. The moment the coachman wanted to refuse, Xia Pingan had already thrown a gold coin to him. As soon as he took the gold coins, the coachman seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. He quickly jumped off the carriage to carry Xia Pingan's luggage. The carriage started to move briskly in the drizzle. Xia Pingan touched his body, and realized that he only had 2 gold coins and a few silver coins left from the money he got from Dawan City all the way here. In the misty rain outside, various tall and gorgeous buildings in the harbor area could be seen everywhere. The signs of various businesses, banks and companies could be seen everywhere. There were all kinds of people in Shangjing City. For the sake of survival, for the sake of fame and fortune, countless people were struggling, climbing, devouring, tearing, and biting in this city. Shangjing City was not a good place to live. However, Xia Pingan liked it very much. Because it was not a good place, he had a chance. The real chance was hidden in the chaos and conflicts. Shangjing City. Here I come. Chapter 167. In the morning, Xia Pingan left Donggang. When the carriage took him to the camp of the Judgment Army, it was completely dark outside. The coachman and the horse had been exhausted after a day of running. During the day, the coachman let the horse rest twice in the stable and fed it with water and fodder. The coachman was also shivering in the cold night wind. After opening the door for Xia Pingan, the coachman said with a smile, "Sir, the camp of the Judgment Army is just in front of you. Just walk along this road for a while and you'll arrive there. Please forgive me. That place is heavily guarded. I really don't dare to go there. You can just walk there." Xia Pingan nodded and said, "Sir, the camp of the Judgment Army is right in front of you." "Okay, thank you. Sir, I still need to give you 35 silver coins." The coachman asked tentatively. After all, Xia Pingan had given him too much money. Even if Xia Pingan hired him for a day, he would not get more than 1 gold coin. This money was more than enough to hire him for 4 or 5 days. "Keep the change. I'll give you more as a reward," Xia Pingan said. "Thank you, sir. Thank you." The coachman let out a sigh of relief and thanked Zhang Tai profusely with a smile. Then, he turned around and drove back. There were still clouds in the sky. Almost no starlight could be seen. Only the shadows of the 2 moons could be seen behind the thick clouds. The gas lamps on the road had been lit, illuminating the puddles of water on the ground. There were not many pedestrians and carriages around. All of them were in a hurry. It seemed that they dared not to stay here any longer. The camp of the Judgment Army was close to a mountain in the north of Shangjing City. This mountain was called Ping Mountain. In the dark, Ping Mountain was lurking like a huge beast, full of a terrifying aura. Xia Pingan did not go to the camp of the Judgment Army. It was late at night. The camp of the Judgment Army would not wait for him. People should rest, not to mention it was so late. Xia Pingan walked on the street for a while and found a hotel. He asked for a room and stayed there for the night. The next morning, he went to the camp of the Judgment Army. The next day, the weather cleared up a little and there was no more drizzle. After having breakfast in the hotel, Xia Pingan checked out and threw his luggage into his own space warehouse. Wearing a black robe, he went to the camp of the Judgment Army in high spirit. The gate of the military camp of Judgment Army was magnificent. The 100 m longer huge granite gatehouse was like a city gate. The gate in the middle of the gatehouse was wide open, while 2 rows of sentries of Shang dynasty in dark red military uniforms were standing at the gate of the gate, looking straight ahead with live ammunition. Xia Pingan did not arrive early. When he arrived, there were already more than 200 people waiting here. All the people waiting here were between 20 and 30 years old. Their gazes were sharp and their auras were steady. There were both men and women of different appearances. Xia Pingan knew at a glance that these people were all summoners below the One Sun realm. There was a sign hanging in front of the side door next to the main entrance. It said, "Recruitment in the Judgment Army." Everyone was waiting there. Xia Pingan was also waiting patiently behind the crowd. After a while, a new summoner would arrive. After waiting for an hour, there were more than 300 summoners gathered here. "Brother, are you also here to join the Judgment Army?" While Xia Pingan was waiting, A newcomer came to Xia Pingan's side and talked to Xia Pingan. Strangers often got to know each other by talking nonsense. Xia Pingan glanced at the person who spoke to him. That person was in his 20s and had a refined appearance. His nose was a nose and his eyes were eyes. His clothes were not eye-catching and he looked approachable. Of course, this was just how it looked. Yes, I'm here to join the Judgment Army. Brother, are you here too? Xia Pingan also asked nonsense. Yes, my name is Chu Yuqian. How should I address you? I'm Xia Pingan. Brother, are you from the Shang dynasty? No, I've been wandering in various countries. Previously, I was in the southern region. What about you? Ha ha, I'm also a rogue summoner like you. Chu Yuqian sighed and looked at the tall gate tower of the Judgment Army with hopeful eyes. The life of a rogue summoner is not easy. It seems free, but it's too difficult to find precious resources. Brother, you're also a summoner, so you must have a deep understanding. I'm about to reach the One Sun realm. Once I break through, I'll need the Holy Spring of the One Sun realm. It's not easy to get the Holy Spring of the One Sun realm. If I can join the Judgment Army, after reaching the One Sun realm, the Judgment Army will provide the Holy Spring of the One Sun realm for free. Many people here have the same goal as me. Yes, I think so too. After joining the Judgment Army, I've heard that as long as I perform well in the Judgment Army will not lack cultivation resources such as realm beads, celestial devices, and Holy Spring. Xia Pingan and Chu Yuqian chatted casually. Of course, but it's not easy to join the Judgment Army. I've heard that the selection process is very strict. It would be good if 7 or 8 of us could be selected today. By the way, brother, you seem to have just arrived in Shangjing. Have you thought about what you'll do if you fail to be selected? Chu Yuqian seemed very enthusiastic and chatted with Xia Pingan. I haven't thought about this. I think if I fail to be selected, I'll first find a job in Shangjing City and settle down. Summoners were also humans. Humans needed to eat, drink, and defecate. They also needed basic necessities such as clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. They also needed cultivation resources. These things all required money, especially in Shangjing City. Unless one's family had a strong foundation, summoners also needed to work in order to have a place in Shangjing City. Haha, not bad, not bad. It's just as I thought. In fact, it's not difficult for wandering summoners like us to find a job in Shangjing City of the Shang dynasty. One of my friends joined the Judgment Army but failed to be selected, so he went to a wealthy family to be a guard. The treatment is pretty good. I also have a friend who became a bounty hunter and settled down here. Later on, he obtained a holy spring and has now cultivated to the Two Sun realm. If I fail to be selected, I'll also try to work as a bounty hunter. If brother wants to go, I can introduce my friend to you. Thank you, thank you. You're welcome, you're welcome. We're all outside, so we should help each other. While the two of them were chatting, 2 people came out from the side door. One of them was in his 20s and looked arrogant, while the other was in his 30s and looked much calmer. Both of them were wearing the uniform of the Judgment Army. Their dark red armor was paired with a double-breasted black robe. Their waists were tied with a dark red brass belt that was about the width of a palm. They were wearing high black leather boots with their trousers tucked into the leather shoes. They looked cool and stylish. On the shoulders of their robes were the red epaulets of the Judgment Army. The epaulets had the symbol of the Dark War God's Thorn Divine Throne. The 20-year-old had 1 star on his epaulets, while the other had 2 stars on his epaulets. The one with 1 star is a 1-sun summoner in the Judgment Army, and the one with 2 stars is a 2-sun summoner. If it's a 4-sun summoner or above, their epaulets will be golden, and there will be a silver-crossed scepter and flame pattern on their epaulets. In the Judgment Army, strength is the military rank. I just don't know what their titles are. Chu Yuqian licked his lips and said to Xia Pingan in an envious tone, If you can wear the uniform of the Judgment Army, you'll be so cool. In the entire divine kingdom of the Dark War God Church, you'll be able to do whatever you want, Xia Pingan revealed a smile. The Judgment Army was the violent machine of the Dark Battle God Church. Therefore, the people in the Judgment Army usually had 3 ranks. It was a little complicated. The rank represented strength, and the rank represented the specific position. This was very easy to understand. For example, a second lieutenant was a platoon leader. A second lieutenant was a rank, and a platoon leader was a rank. However, other than that, the Judgment Army also had a religious rank, which represented the person's identity in the Dark Battle God Church. The most common status in the church was a member of the church, followed by a priest, then a deacon, a priest, a bishop, and so on. In the Holy Kingdom of the Dark War God Church, as well as the holy kingdoms of other churches, the higher the title, the higher the title, the higher the title. As soon as the 2 people walked out of the side door, the scene instantly quieted down. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the 2 people. If you want to join the Judgment Army, you have to follow the first rule of the Judgment Army, which is to keep your mouth shut. I don't care what you used to do, what your identity and experiences are. From now on, if anyone wants to speak or express their opinions, you have to raise your hand. Unless you have permission, you are not allowed to speak. Do you understand? The young man in his 20s with an arrogant look said to everyone directly. Everyone nodded, but no one spoke. Seeing everyone nod, the young man continued, "People will die in the selection of the Judgment Army. If you're afraid of death, don't come in and waste everyone's time. If you're not afraid of death, you can come in and get a number to participate in the selection." The people in front began to line up to get a number. Those who received a number took it and stood aside. The man in his 30s with 2 stars on his epaulets kept silent. He just put his hands behind his back and stared indifferently at the people in front of him who were lining up to get a number. After the people in front had received more than 40 numbers, the man in his 30s finally made a move. He reached out his hand and grabbed a person who had just reached the front of the line. He grabbed that person's collar and threw him more than 30 meters away. He fell heavily to the ground and vomited blood. You came here 4 years ago to participate in the selection of the Judgment Army and failed. Today, you grew a beard and changed your hairstyle, and you want to get away with it? The selection of the Judgment Army is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you dare to get away with it next time, you will be killed without mercy. Get lost. The man in his 30s scolded. The person who was thrown out didn't dare to make a sound. He got up from the ground and left dejectedly. Chapter 168. Seeing someone being thrown out, Xia Pingan was also taken aback. In 4 years, how many unfamiliar faces would a person see? That man had only seen someone once 4 years ago, yet he still remembered that person today. His memory was too terrifying. It was as if he had awakened some kind of ability to recognize others. Soon, it was Xia Pingan's turn. Xia Pingan received a number plate. Chu Yuqian, who was behind Xia Pingan, also received a number plate. Xia Pingan found that the numbers of the number plates were random, not given out in order. The front of the number plate he received read 68, while Chu Yuqian, who was behind him, received 113. In less than a few minutes, everyone received a number plate. There were a total of 326 people participating in the selection today. Those who have received a number plate, you can follow me in. The arrogant-looking young man in his 20s said to everyone, and then led the 326 people into the camp of the Judgment Army from the side door. After entering the camp, there was a wide road, and both sides of the road were filled with pine and cypress trees. After entering, less than 100 meters away, there was a huge drill ground. There were hundreds of numbered squares on the drill ground, and each square was more than 30 square meters, the size of a ring. Well, everyone, look at the number plate in your hands, and enter the ring according to the number on the number plate. The arrogant-looking young man in his 20s said loudly. Everyone then entered their respective squares in the arena. Now, those who have an even number plate can enter the odd ring that is one place smaller than your number. Those who have the number plate in the second ring can enter the number plate in the first ring, and those who have the number plate in the third ring can enter the number plate in the second ring. Xia Pingan walked to the 67th ring, where a strong summoner in his 30s was staring at Xia Pingan with a dignified face and taking a deep breath. Xia Pingan had already guessed what was going to happen next. As long as there was nothing wrong with their brains, they could guess what was going to happen next. The first stage of the Judgment Army selection is to test everyone's hand-to-hand combat ability. The fighting field will be in the arena. If you are knocked down and can't get up again, you will be knocked out of the yellow line area of the arena, or step outside the yellow line area, or take the initiative to admit defeat, you will be eliminated. If two people fall out of the arena at the same time, both of them will be eliminated at the same time. If both parties are still in the arena at the end of the match, both of them will be eliminated at the same time. In the end, if both parties are unable to stand up on their own, they will also be eliminated. No weapons, hidden weapons, poisons, summoning spells, or special awakening abilities can be used in hand-to-hand combat. Once discovered, you will be eliminated. The young man in his 20s said so that everyone could hear him. We can start now. As soon as he finished speaking, the people on the stage began to move. Among the 163 arenas in the arena, there were some summoners who caught their opponents off guard and attacked swiftly. Almost at the beginning of the match, they blasted the summoners who were in the same arena out of their arenas without saying a word, instantly obtaining victory. Many of the summoners in the ring started to fight, and it was abnormally intense. Xia Pingan was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he clasped his fist to the summoner in front of him and said apologetically, "Brother, I'm sorry to offend you." The summoner was not in a hurry to rush over. He also clasped his fist to Xia Pingan and said, "I'm sorry to offend you today. Everyone wants to enter the Judgment Army. Let's rely on our own abilities. Please, please." Xia Pingan did not know the details of the other party, so he did not dare to be careless. He immediately got into a fighting stance, and the person on the opposite side did the same. Both sides turned half a circle in the arena. The person on the opposite side roared, and suddenly rushed towards Xia Pingan, punching him fiercely in the chest. Xia Pingan did not back down. He directly used one of the 7 styles of the Fierce Tiger. Fierce Tiger descends the mountain. He used his fist as a knife and punched back. Xia Pingan punched out. In the wind of his fist, there was a tiger's roar, which immediately attracted the attention of the audience outside the arena. The two fists collided without any fancy move. Xia Pingan's figure did not move, but the person's figure stepped back 3 steps in a row, and his face changed slightly. After the collision of fists, Xia Pingan already had a plan in his heart. The person on the opposite side, although not weak, was not his opponent. Whether it was speed, strength, reaction, or moves, they were all inferior to him. The person seemed to feel this, but he did not give up. Instead, he fought even harder. He roared and rushed over again. After exchanging more than 10 moves with the person, Xia Pingan looked like a tiger watching its prey. In the dazzling shadows of fists and palms, his palms fell on the person's chest, and the person was directly knocked out of the 67 arena. After the person was knocked out of the arena, his body was only shaken, and his qi and blood were not flowing smoothly. He also knew that Xia Pingan was merciful. Just now, he did not have time to defend. If Xia Pingan raised his palms a few more times, he could have taken his throat. The person was convinced of his loss. He saluted Xia Pingan with his fists and walked away. On the 67 arena, there was only Xia Pingan alone. The winners and losers in the other arenas were also decided one after another. Xia Pingan looked at the 113 arena and saw Chu Youqian's agile body moving around the arena. The person who was fighting with him was confused and disoriented. Not long after, the person who was fighting with Chu Youqian saw that there was no winner and was a little anxious. Chu Youqian skillfully grabbed his hand and threw him out of the arena. Chu Youqian won. In less than 10 minutes, the winners and losers in all the arenas were decided. In the blink of an eye, half of the 326 people who came in together were eliminated. Many of the arenas were covered in blood. Those who were eliminated were directly taken away and left the Judgment Army's camp. Those who were injured were directly carried down. After one round of competition, many people had broken arms and legs. In the end, only 163 people were left in their respective arenas. The atmosphere in the arena was tense. Now, the winner of arena number 3 will enter arena number 1, the winner of arena number 7 will enter arena number 5, the winner of arena number 11 will enter arena number 9, and so on. The winner of arena number 3 will enter arena number 1, the winner of arena number 7 will enter arena number 5, the winner of arena number 11 will enter arena number 9, and so on. The people in the arenas began to move. The people in the 65 arena did not move, but Xia Pingan walked from the 67 arena to the 65 arena. As for the winner of this round, it was luck. Luck was also a skill and strength. On the 65 arena was a woman in her 20s. She was quite charming and was wearing a green dress. However, Xia Pingan did not dare to underestimate this woman. The man who had just fought with this woman was kicked in the temple by this woman. He vomited blood and flew out of the arena. Mei is a newcomer and has no one to rely on in Shangjing City. I want to join the Judgment Army to make a living and have someone to rely on. Brother, please take care of me. Seeing Xia Pingan coming over, the woman still looked pitiful and saluted to Xia Pingan. Xia Pingan curled his lips and smiled. Sister, don't worry. I will be gentle later. Sister, don't kick my face. The woman looked at Xia Pingan. Her eyes moved and she smiled like a flower. Why don't I have a competition with you? If you lose, you will admit defeat and let me have a round. What do you think? What kind of competition? How about a rock-paper-scissors game? While the two of them were talking, the other people in the arena had already started to fight. Compared to the first round, the competition between the victors this time was even more intense. The level of the competition was clearly higher than before. Xia Pingan laughed. He was determined to join the Judgment Army. He did not want to play any tricks with this woman. Rock, paper, scissors is too simple. Sister, if you want a competition, why don't we recite poems? You and I will each ask a question. The loser will automatically leave. How about that? The woman sighed faintly and looked resentful. Brother, you don't want me to win? Ha ha ha, I can play rock, paper, scissors with you when I drink with you another day. At this time, since we don't want to give in, let's fight. It's more practical. Please. Well, in that case, I'll offend you. Although the woman said that, she didn't hold back at all. Her body moved, and her palm was like a knife, directly stabbing towards Xia Pingan's throat. It was incomparably ruthless, and her speed was much faster than Xia Pingan's previous opponent. Xia Pingan did not hesitate and kicked the woman's waist. The woman dodged to the side and directly kicked Xia Pingan's crotch. F***ck. This woman's attack was too ruthless. This move forced Xia Pingan to take a step back. After a few moves, Xia Pingan found that this woman's figure was flexible and changeable. However, compared with her previous opponent, her strength was somewhat lacking. Therefore, this woman's attacks were all killing moves. She wanted to win with one move. Punches and kicks were not her specialty. This woman usually used some kind of small weapon in close combat. In a situation where she had the advantage in speed and body movement, if she also had a weapon in her hand, then the lethality would be completely different. If she met someone else, it would not be difficult for this woman to win again. However, she met Xia Pingan, which was tantamount to kicking an iron plate. After a few moves, Xia Pingan used the dragon crouching dragon and used his shoulder and arm to block the woman's kick to the back of his head. Then, he grabbed the woman's ankle. Before the woman could twist her body and launch a series of kicks, Xia Pingan fiercely swung and broke the woman's technique with force. Her legs left the ground and spun like a windmill. With a whoosh, she was thrown out of the circle. The woman's figure tumbled in the air like a gymnast. However, she could not borrow or divert the force. When she landed, she was already several meters away from the yellow line. Xia Pingan smiled and clasped his hands towards the woman. The woman glared at Xia Pingan and stomped her foot before turning around and leaving. Chu Yuqian had a hard time winning this round. Although he won, he was beaten to the point of coughing up blood. After this round, another 81 people were eliminated. There were only 82 people left. Those who were eliminated were directly led out of the military camp. The first round of selection is over. Everyone, follow me for the second round. The 2 people of the Judgment Army glanced at the remaining people and continued to lead Xia Pingan and the others into the military camp. Chapter 169. After walking for a few minutes through the drill ground, Xia Pingan and the others were taken to a 3-story high platform that was more than 10 meters above the ground. It was completely built with steel bars, steel rails and various steel structural components. There was no wall or staircase on the high platform. The ground and the surrounding walls of the high platform were covered with cracks and holes, large or small. Those cracks and holes could easily allow a person to drill in. This round will test your basic summoning skills. At the same time, at least half of you will be eliminated. Now there are 82 of you. After a while, each of you will summon a slave soldier to compete with each other. I will light an incense stick. Before the incense stick burns out, the 41 slave soldiers who can stand on the top of the 3rd floor of the high platform will be left behind. If the summoned slave soldiers are killed or not standing on the platform, all of you will be eliminated. If the last incense stick burns out and there are more than 41 slave soldiers left on the platform, all of you will be eliminated. Alright, you can begin now. After you summon your slave soldiers, you must immediately give the order. You can only give the order once. After you give the order, I will use the God Barrier bead to isolate the platform. No one will be able to give the order a second time. After saying this, the arrogant-looking young man in his 20s lit an incense stick in an incense burner under the high platform in front of Xia Pingan and the others. Then, the selection began again. Without hesitation, the 82 people who came here summoned their own slave soldiers one by one with flashes of red light. Xia Pingan also summoned his own elite slave soldier. He took a look and found that at least 1/3 of the 82 people could summon elite slave soldiers. This ratio was really high. To be honest, the summoning of slave soldiers was not a basic summoning skill in the Fire Country. Some summoners might not be able to master it for a long time after completing the Foundation establishment. However, in this place, the Judgment Army seemed to have tacitly agreed that everyone who came here had mastered the summoning of slave soldiers. The reason why this high platform looked so complicated and strange was that it could better test the strength and wisdom of the slave soldiers. Behind the strength and wisdom of the slave soldiers, it would indirectly reflect the situation of the summoner who had fused with the realm bead. Through a small slave soldier, the summoner could complete an evaluation of the summoner's secret mandala and get to the bottom of it. Xia Pingan instantly understood the purpose of this selection. The 82 slave soldiers stood in front of the 82 summoners. The task order had to be issued immediately and could not be changed halfway. This set a higher requirement for the wisdom and judgment of the slave soldiers. After everyone gave the order, all the summoners began to retreat. The young man who had just explained the rules moved his hand and took out a green bead the size of a pigeon's egg. He threw the green bead into the air. The green bead flew to the top of the high platform and stopped there. It bloomed with a green brilliance in the air. Rays of green brilliance fell from the sky like a waterfall and completely covered the high platform. As soon as the green light fell, Xia Pingan felt that the connection between him and the elite slave soldier he summoned was blocked. That green bead must be the God Barrier bead. When used on the battlefield, this thing could block the connection between the summoner and the summoned creature within a certain range. It was equivalent to a remote sensing signal block. It seemed to be quite advanced. Xia Pingan had never seen this thing before. At this time, the ability of the summoned slave soldiers was reflected. Almost at the same time when the green light fell, some slave soldiers had started to climb up the iron frame of the high platform towards the top floor by biting their weapons with their teeth. However, the elite slave soldier that Xia Pingan summoned was a bit different. When the other slave soldiers started to climb up, the elite slave soldier that Xia Pingan summoned ran around the high platform and observed the situation everywhere. It was not in a hurry to climb up. Instead, it just stayed downstairs in a corner away from the other slave soldiers and made a vigilant posture. Only after a couple of minutes, some slave soldiers had climbed up to the third floor of the high platform along the iron pipes and frames. 1, 2, 3, more and more. As more and more slave soldiers climbed up, when the number of slave soldiers surpassed 40, those slave soldiers who climbed up first started to prevent the other slave soldiers from climbing up. Therefore, the battle between the slave soldiers began. The battle started to be splendid in a split second. Those slave soldiers who climbed up along the periphery of the high platform were easily killed by the lances and javelins of the slave soldiers on the top floor. The moment a slave soldier was killed, a summoner would be eliminated. Smart slave soldiers realized that it was more dangerous to climb up from the periphery of the high platform. Therefore, they changed their direction and climbed up from the inside of the high platform. When they reached the second floor, they would use those steel structures and steel pipes as a cover and break through the top floor from the inside of the high platform. In this way, both parties were evenly matched. The long halberds and spears on the second floor could pierce through the gaps and wounds on the soles and legs of those slave soldiers on the second floor. As long as those slave soldiers on the second floor fell to the ground, some long halberds and javelins could kill them. Elite slave soldiers who had javelins soon gained an advantage in this situation. Because javelins could be killed from a long distance, as long as elite slave soldiers chose to break through from the inside of that steel structure, they would have a chance to rush onto the high platform. If the slave soldiers on the high platform wanted to avoid being injured by the slave soldiers on the bottom floor, they only had two ways. Either escape from those gaps which could prevent slave soldiers from climbing up, or hide in some blind corners which were built by steel pipes and rails. However, the two choices would allow the slave soldiers on the bottom floor to rush up easily. At the same time, once the elite slave soldiers reached the top, the space above them would be congested, greatly limiting their ability to cast their javelins. In the end, they would be rendered useless. On the high platform, the battle cries of slave soldiers shook the sky. In order to fight for the position on the high platform, the slave soldiers on the top floor tried their best to prevent the slave soldiers on the bottom floor from climbing up, while the slave soldiers on the bottom floor tried their best to stab the slave soldiers on the top floor down. This scene was as same as that of a siege. More and more slave soldiers were killed and turned into light spots. More and more slave soldiers successfully rushed onto the high platform. Soon, the slave soldiers on the high platform started to avoid those gaps and holes which were easy to be attacked by the slave soldiers on the high platform. They started to try their best to hide in the blind corners. The silly slave soldiers who were guarding the gaps and holes and trying their best to stop the slave soldiers from rushing up were soon killed by the slave soldiers who were rushing up from below. More and more slave soldiers rushed onto the highest platform. Soon, the number of slave soldiers on the highest platform broke through 40 and 50. After that, the slave soldiers on the highest platform started to fight each other. Some slave soldiers were killed by other slave soldiers on the third floor of the high platform, while some slave soldiers were pushed off the high platform. The battle between slave soldiers was extremely fierce as none of them were afraid of death. Not until then did the elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan, who had been idling at the bottom, start to climb up. The elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan was the last one that started to climb up. After discarding its long halberd, it started to climb up from the inside of the high platform with only its javelin on its back. When it reached the bottom of the third floor, it stopped. It didn't hurry to climb up. Instead, it just waited in the gaps and holes below the third floor, observing and being alert. The incense downstairs was burning out bit by bit. The battle on the top floor of the third floor soon came to an end. Those slave soldiers who were not powerful enough and were not smart enough were eliminated one after another. When the incense downstairs turned into a finger-long piece of incense downstairs, the battle on the top floor of the third floor finally came to an end. There were 41 slave soldiers standing on the top floor of the third floor of the building. 2/3 of them were elite slave soldiers. Besides these 41 slave soldiers, only that slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan was still observing, alert and waiting below the second floor of the building. All the other slave soldiers had been killed. At this moment, that slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan finally took out its javelin. As it jumped up and down, it tried to use the terrain below to cover itself, while throwing its javelin upwards through those gaps and holes. In order to avoid being the targets of the javelins, 41 slave soldiers were moving around on the third floor and avoiding those holes and gaps which could be easily attacked. However, the javelins of elite slave soldiers could be thrown out from any place on the third floor as long as the holes and gaps were the size of a fist. Before the elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan launched an attack, the battle on the top floor of the building had become chaotic. As the terrain below was open, they could run, jump and dodge. However, over 40 slave soldiers on the top floor of the building were huddled together. As a result, each slave soldier's moving space was completely compressed. As the elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan constantly moved around and assumed an attacking posture, in order to avoid the tools coming from below, the slave soldiers on top of it ran here and there like ducks being chased away. In this case, those blind spots where they could dodge the attacks from below became precious. All of a sudden, the battle on the top floor of the building broke out. A slave soldier suddenly stabbed an elite slave soldier to death with his javelin. After that, the elite slave soldier disappeared and rushed to that blind spot. The other 2 slave soldiers did the same. A conflict broke out among the slave soldiers on the top floor of the building in a split second. As a result, 3 more slave soldiers were killed. As a result, there were 38 slave soldiers on the top floor of the building. At this moment, that elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan took advantage of the chaos on the top floor of the building and rushed up through a hole. Finally, there were 39 slave soldiers on the top floor of the building. That elite slave soldier summoned by Xia Pingan didn't experience any battle, neither did it kill any slave soldier. Finally, it easily stood on the top floor of the building and successfully promoted to a higher level. Chapter 170. In the third stage, 43 people were eliminated in one go. Chu Yuqian had also passed this stage. The 43 people who had been eliminated were led out of the camp by the 20-year-old member of the Judgment Army. Only the man in his 30s with 2 stars on his epaulets remained. Although they had passed this stage, the atmosphere was still tense. Those who remained knew that there would be even harsher tests to come. Congratulations on passing the first 3 stages. It can be said that those who are left are the cream of the crop before the One Sun stage. The next stage is very simple. It will also test your summoning ability. I will summon a warrior, and you will take turns according to the number plate in your hand. Summon the creature you think is the strongest. Remember, you only have one chance to summon. As long as your summoned creature can defeat and kill the warrior I summon, you will pass this stage. If your summoned creature is killed by my summoned creature, you will be eliminated. Is that clear? Are you clear? The rules were simple and clear. Everyone nodded. Alright, since you're clear, let's begin. We'll start with number 7. The man in his 30s with 2 stars on his epaulets pointed at the summoner with number 7. That summoner's number plate was the smallest among all the contestants. Summoners number 1 to number 6 in front of him had already been eliminated in the previous round. He was the only one left among the summoners number 1 to number 10. Now, there were only 1 or 2 contestants left among the 10 contestants. That person was the first to appear. He was clearly nervous, but there was no time for him to get used to the situation. Everyone spread out and made way for the 2 of them. As the 30-odd-year-old man with 2 stars on his epaulets pointed his finger, a black fog suddenly appeared in the open space in front of them. From the black fog, a majestic warrior slowly walked out. He was holding a huge zamadeo that was nearly 2 m long and wearing a majestic shining armor. Xia Pingon looked at the warrior who had been summoned and was slightly shocked. The warrior was wearing armor with 2 large round shields on the left and right sides of his breastplate that shone brightly. A wide belt was tied around his waist, a shawl was draped over his shoulders, and a skirt covered his thighs. All of this was made of armor plates. There were even tiger head shoulder guards on his shoulders. The design was gorgeous. This armor was clearly the Great Tang's Mingguang armor. That man couldn't have summoned an elite warrior of the Great Tang, right? The man holding the number 7 was a little nervous, but under everyone's gaze, he still took a deep breath and began to summon. There was a flash of light on the field, and that man summoned a black-clothed assassin with a short sword in his hand. As long as you summon him, we can begin, the man with the 2 stars on his epaulets calmly said. The assassin took the initiative to charge at the Great Tang warrior. His body twisted strangely like smoke, and the dagger in the assassin's hand was hidden in his sleeve. The 2 sides began to exchange blows. When the assassin was about 3 meters away from the warrior, he swung his arm and threw out several cold glints, aiming for the Great Tang warrior's face, neck, and chest. The Great Tang warrior only raised his hands to protect his face. The darts he threw fell to the ground when they hit the Mingguang armor on the Great Tang warrior's body. Since the first attack failed and the darts were useless, the assassin lowered his body and flew close to the ground. He wanted to circle behind the Great Tang warrior. The dagger in his sleeve appeared in his hand, and he wanted to cut the Great Tang warrior's neck from behind. He kicked out from behind, aiming for the Great Tang warrior's crotch. The attacks of the summoned warrior could be said to be strange and sinister, and his figure could be said to be agile and cunning. However, Xia Pingon still shook his head. In this kind of situation, summoning an assassin to fight with a warrior would mean that the assassin's stealth and surprise had been lost. This assassin was actually half useless. It was just like when 2 armies were fighting and you arranged for an assassin to charge. The time and space here were not advantageous to the assassin. Perhaps number 7 wanted to take a gamble. Perhaps this assassin was the strongest person that number 7 could summon, but Xia Pingon was not optimistic. In the face of this attack, the Great Tang warrior suddenly turned around and held his zamadeo horizontally. With a clang, he blocked the dagger that was aimed at his neck. As for the kick from the assassin, the Great Tang warrior did not care at all. The moment the Great Tang warrior turned around, that kick was blocked by the skirt of the Mingguang armor. The next second, the Great Tang warrior suddenly stepped forward. The huge zamadeo in his hand spun nimbly and slashed out diagonally. The assassin lowered his body and wanted to retreat. However, the zamadeo was too long and too big. When the zamadeo slashed down, it covered a radius of 2 meters. The Zamadeo slashed down diagonally like a door, cutting from high to low. There was no way to dodge. The assassin could only use his dagger to block and block, but in the eyes of Xia Pingan and everyone else, the great Tang warrior's dagger and the assassin's body were cut into two by the Zamadeo. The Zamadeo was too powerful. It was not something that the assassin's dagger could block. The assassin turned into black smoke and dissipated. Number 7 had a bitter expression on his face as he silently retreated. Next, the man in his 30s with 2 stars on his epaulets said calmly. The next person to go up was number 12. Number 12 was also a male summoner. After he went up, he gritted his teeth and waved his hand, summoning a cavalryman on a warhorse. The cavalryman was also wearing armor and holding a spear. The warhorse galloped twice on the spot. The cavalryman clamped his legs on the horse's abdomen. With a neigh, the warhorse sped up and charged toward the great Tang warrior. This was a duel between a cavalryman and a Zamadeo. The two sides soon clashed. Just as the spear was about to reach him, the great Tang warrior with the horse-slaying sword leaped into the air and swung his sword down with all his might. The Zamadeo directly severed the neck of the warhorse. The horse's head fell off and the entire warhorse turned into light and dissipated. The cavalryman on the warhorse fell heavily to the ground. Before he could get up, the great Tang warrior with the Zamadeo had already rushed over. He kicked the spear away from the cavalryman's hand and stepped on the cavalryman's chest. Then, he raised his Zamadeo and chopped off the cavalryman's head. The cavalryman that was summoned also dissipated. Summoner number 12 sadly retreated. Next, number 26 went up. This number 26 was also a female summoner. She was quite pretty, but her face was cold. The moment number 26 went up, she summoned a 17 to 18 meters long blood-red python. When the surrounding summoners saw the python, many of them gasped and quietly retreated a few steps. The blood-red python wriggled on the ground and approached the great Tang warrior bit by bit. This time, the great Tang warrior looked as if he was facing a formidable enemy. He held the Zamadeo in his hand and took a defensive stance. He carefully faced the blood-red python. A moment later, the great Tang warrior chose to take the initiative to attack. He rushed over with the Zamadeo and slashed at the blood-red python. The blood-red python seemed to have been waiting for this moment. When it saw the great Tang warrior rushing over, the blood-red python opened its mouth and spat out a puff of black smoke. The black smoke immediately enveloped the great Tang warrior. When the black smoke dissipated, the great Tang warrior's face turned black. The Mingguang armor on his body seemed to have lost its luster. His body swayed and fell to the ground. The python opened its mouth and swallowed the great Tang warrior from head to toe. This round, number 26 wins. Next, the man in his 30s with 2 stars on his epaulets said as he summoned another great Tang warrior who looked exactly like the previous one. Number 26 waved his hand and the blood-red python dissipated. Summoner number 34 went up. Summoner number 34 summoned an archer. The archer moved nimbly and did not get close to the great Tang warrior. Instead, he maintained a distance of more than 30 meters from the great Tang warrior and attacked directly with his bow. After shooting more than 10 arrows, the human archer summoned by number 34 shot the great Tang warrior in the face. The great Tang warrior dissipated and number 34 passed the round again. Xia Pingan was the 7th to go up. After observing the previous rounds, Xia Pingan had a rough idea of the great Tang warrior's combat strength. Therefore, Xia Pingan did not waste any time and directly used 108 points of divine energy to summon a Xuanwu the size of a washbasin. Xuanwu's victory was clean and crisp. As soon as the black tortoise appeared, it exhaled, and a layer of frost immediately formed on the great Tang warrior's face, armor, saber, and the ground. The temperature in the arena suddenly plummeted, and quite a few people shivered. The frozen Great Tang warrior was like a rusty robot. His joints were frozen and his movements were sluggish. Then, Xuanwu flew over and bit the Great Tang warrior's leg. The black water instantly covered the Great Tang warrior and turned him into black ice. The black ice then shattered and the Great Tang warrior dissipated. The Xuanwu summoned by Xia Pingan was the fastest and most efficient one to finish the battle. Everyone around looked at Xia Pingan. The man from the Judgment Army also looked at Xia Pingan deeply again. After several rounds, everyone realized that Xia Pingan was special. Xia Pingan had stood out. This round, number 68 wins. Next, the people behind summoned all kinds of creatures to fight with the Great Tang warrior. However, not many people could kill the Great Tang warrior. On average, only 1 out of every 3 summoners succeeded. Chu Yuqian also summoned an archer, and he won as well. Out of the 39 summoners, only 12 managed to pass this stage. Chapter 171. The 2 people from the Judgment Army brought Xia Pingan and the other 12 people who had passed the first 4 levels to another place. This place was in a bamboo forest in the military camp. The environment was quite tranquil. A 7-story pagoda with a white outer wall and light blue glazed tiles stood in front of them. The glazed pagoda was very beautiful, delicate and solemn. The 2 people of the Judgment Army directly led Xia Pingan and the other 8 people into the beautiful pagoda. In the middle of the hall on the first floor of the pagoda, there was a huge black crystal ball with a diameter of more than 2 meters. The black crystal ball was filled with rolling light, and there were constantly colorful lights flickering in and out of the crystal ball. It was very mysterious. An old man in a white robe and a strange tall white hat was meditating beside the huge black crystal ball with his eyes closed. Not until Xia Pingan and the other 8 people entered the pagoda did the old man open his eyes and stand up. He then glanced at Xia Pingan and the other 8 people with a pair of tranquil eyes. "Are there only 12 people today?" the old man asked. "Yes, please take another look." The 2 people of the Judgment Army who led Xia Pingan and the other 8 people here were very polite to the old man. They even used honorifics when speaking to him. Come on then." The old man lazily walked to the front of the black crystal ball and put his hand on it. After that, he threw a glance at this side. "You can all go over there. Just put one hand on the crystal ball." Hearing this, Xia Pingan and the other 8 people walked over there and put one hand on the crystal ball. Xia Pingan had heard Elder Jing mention the last level of the Judgment Army. Elder Jing said that the last level to join the Judgment Army was to drip blood and ask one's heart. The strange crystal ball in front of him was a mystical item called the Soul Crystal. The old man in white was the chosen priest of the Dark War religion. In the Dark War religion, chosen priests were people who could use their souls to communicate with the Dark War god. They were the most devout believers of the Dark War god. They were also called soul ferrymen. The moment Xia Pingan put his hand on the huge crystal ball, the huge crystal ball had produced a strange suction force. Xia Pingan's hand seemed to be sucked by a suction cup, making him unable to move. At the same time, the light mist inside the huge black crystal ball rolled and turned into 12 sharp spikes, extending out from the inside of the crystal ball. Xia Pingan only felt a slight pain in his palm when the spikes in the huge crystal ball pierced a small hole. A drop of blood was then sucked into the huge crystal ball. Not only Xia Pingan but also the other people's palms were pierced through. Our God walks in the darkness, and there is light in the darkness. Our God raises his saber and sword, and peace and tranquility descend upon the world. The chosen priest in white robe murmured in a low, dreamy voice. At the same time, a cloud of dark red mist surged out of the black crystal ball, wrapping up Xia Pingan and the others. Xia Pingan tried his best to stay awake. However, as soon as he was wrapped up by the black mist, He felt like he was beginning to integrate with the realm bead. His eyelids grew heavier and heavier, and he felt like falling asleep. In a daze, Xia Pingan's ears seemed to hear a voice that seemed to come from the horizon. The voice directly appeared in Xia Pingan's mind. "What's your name? Where do you come from? Which god do you believe in? Were you instructed to join the Judgment Army? Do you want to harm the Shang dynasty and the Dark War God cult?" Xia Pingan did not know what happened next. In a daze, he fell asleep. His body and mind relaxed, and he wandered in a sweet dream. After an unknown period of time, Xia Pingan woke up. When Xia Pingan woke up, he saw that the dark red mist that had wrapped everyone had dissipated. Everyone's hands were still pressed on the huge crystal ball. Among the 12 people, a dark red shadow of the thorny divine throne appeared above the heads of 4 people. The other 8 people, including himself, had nothing above their head. Chu Yuqian was also not selected. The female summoner who had summoned the snake also had such a shadow above her head. The other 3 male summoners also had such a shadow. The 4 people who had been selected all had excited expressions on their faces, while the others had bitter and helpless expressions on their faces. 4 people were selected out of almost 400 people. It was really 1 out of 100. Xia Pingan had already vaguely guessed the result. He felt a little stifled in his heart and was also a little disappointed. The contrast was too great. He came here full of confidence and performed outstandingly in the first 4 rounds. He didn't expect to be eliminated in the last round. This feeling was like a person who wanted to enter the Summer Palace Vocational Technical College with full confidence before the college entrance examination, only to find out that he had failed. Motherf *Ker, how did the final stage, blood drop questioning the heart, select the candidates? Why was he eliminated? Xia Pingan was extremely depressed. Only 4 people were selected to join the Judgment Army this time. Those with the thorny divine throne shadow above their heads stay. The others follow me. The arrogant-looking young man in his 20s said to Xia Pingan and the others. Xia Pingan and the others had no choice but to leave with the young man. However, just as Xia Pingan walked to the exit of the pagoda, a voice suddenly sounded in Xia Pingan's mind. "Young man, congratulations on being selected to join the Dark Shadow Squad of the Judgment Army." The Dark Shadow Squad is the most secretive existence in the Judgment Army. The identity of those who join is kept secret. Only the top elite summoners in the Judgment Army are eligible to join. Among the 12 people today, you are the only one who has been selected to join the Dark Shadow Squad. Don't leave Shangjing City for the next few days. Find time to go to the Fearless House in 100 Spirits Alley. Go to 100 Spirits Alley to find someone to tell you. This voice was the voice of the chosen priest. Xia Pingan was shocked. He did not turn back. He only glanced behind him with his remote vision ability and saw that the old man was looking at his back with a deep gaze. When Xia Pingan looked back with his remote vision ability, the chosen priest revealed an imperceptible smile. He seemed to have felt Xia Pingan's gaze. The chosen priest nodded slightly as if he was praising Xia Pingan for not rashly turning back. The faces of the other 7 people who left with Xia Pingan were still the same as usual. They were all a little disappointed and helpless. A few minutes later, Xia Pingan and the other 7 people were sent out from the side door of the Judgment Army's camp. From morning till now, it was already noon. Sigh, I didn't expect that we couldn't pass the last round. It's too difficult for the Judgment Army to recruit people. Chu Yuqian shook his head and sighed as he walked out of the camp. He looked at Xia Pingan and asked, "Brother Xia, what are your plans?" Chapter 172. Xia Pingan thought for a while before answering, "I don't have a specific plan for the time being. I plan to settle down in Shangjing City first." "Brother Xia, are you not going to leave Shangjing City for the time being?" Chu Yuqian asked again. Xia Pingan shook his head. Shangjing City is so prosperous. It's not easy to come here. It's a pity to leave. I'm not going to leave for the time being. What about you? Brother Chu, what's your plan? Chu Yuqian rubbed his face. I've told you before that I have a friend who's a bounty hunter. I'm going to have a try. Brother Xia, do you want to go with me? Xia Pingan looked up at the sun hanging in the sky and rubbed his stomach. He had been here all morning and was already hungry. Let me take a look again. It's getting late, let's find a place to eat first. It's rare to get to know Brother Chu, so I'll treat Brother Chu to today's meal. Ha ha ha, alright. Let's go. I just happened to know of a place nearby called the Retaining Immortal Restaurant. I heard that the Retaining Immortal Restaurant's braised meat and immortal intoxication wine are quite special. Why don't we go and try it? Ha ha ha, Brother Chu, please lead the way. Chu Yuqian took Xia Pingan to Retaining Immortal's restaurant. After a meal, it was already afternoon when they came out of Retaining Immortal's restaurant. The Drunken Immortal's wine of Retaining Immortal's restaurant was really special. Xia Pingan's body was almost immune to ordinary alcohol. However, after drinking 2 pots of Drunken Immortal's wine, Xia Pingan felt that his face was a little hot. His divine sense was slightly hazy, and he felt a little drunk. It's not easy to stay in Shangjing City. Chu Yuqian was still a little drunk. He burped and said to Xia Pingan, Brother Xia, if you want to stay in Shangjing City, you have to rent a place. It's not convenient to stay in ordinary hotels, and those high-end hotels are too expensive. Renting a place is the most suitable. The houses in the suburbs are cheap, and the closer to the center of Shangjing City, the more expensive they are. If you want to rent a house, you can find a broker for help. As long as you pay some money, you can find one quickly. Thank you for telling me, Brother Chu. I was just about to find a cheap place to stay in the suburbs. I've been renting a small courtyard at 112 Fian Road in Shangjing City's Swallow Descent town. If Brother Xia doesn't mind, you can come and find me. The two of us can squeeze together, that's fine. I won't disturb Brother Chu any further. I'll find a place to stay myself. Ha ha ha, let's meet again if fate allows it. The two of them cupped their hands and bid each other farewell at the entrance of the restaurant. In the afternoon, the streets were bustling with people and carriages. After bidding farewell to Chu Yuqian at the entrance of Lucien restaurant, Xia Pingan felt for the last 2 gold coins in his pocket. He first found a bookstore on the street and bought a map of Shangjing City. Then, he took a public bus and wandered around the city. Shangjing City was too big. It was not easy to travel through half of the northern side of Shangjing City in one day. Xia Pingan only took a cursory look around. Other than being big, Shangjing City had another unique characteristic. It had a lot of people. With a lot of people, the competition for survival at the bottom grew. The villas and courtyards of the wealthy in the northern side of Shangjing City were luxurious. However, on the streets where the commoners lived, even the stalls selling roasted red potatoes and steamed buns were crowded. In the city, there were fortune-tellers, stalls, cart drivers, and all sorts of people selling snacks on the street. There were countless people from all walks of life. As for where they lived, most of the families of 4, 5, 3 generations, 4 generations, 5 or 6 families were squeezed into a cramped courtyard house. The most crowded buildings were the Jing buildings that were built according to the pattern of Sihiyuan. The Jing buildings in Shangjing City had a long history. Each floor of the Jing buildings was equivalent to a Sihiyuan. The corridors were filled with people. They were not as spacious as the courtyards in the Sihiyuan. Therefore, the Jing buildings were even more crowded. These Jing houses were the slums of Shangjing City. Those with better family conditions could live in loose bungalows and small courtyards left by their ancestors. However, the bungalows and courtyards were not large either. If a family of 4 could live in a bungalow of 100 square meters in Shangjing City, they could be regarded as an upper-middle-class family in Shangjing City. There were even fewer families who could live in a single courtyard. The courtyards were all old buildings. Once the ancestors separated, a single courtyard would become the courtyards of countless families. It was hard to find peace and quiet. After 3 or 4 generations, more and more families lived in a single courtyard, and it became more and more crowded. Xia Pingan found a broker and casually inquired. The housing prices in Shangjing City were indeed exaggerated. A small courtyard in an ordinary location in the city would cost more than 4 gold coins a month. The deposit was 1 month and the payment was 3 months. The price was even more expensive if the location was better and there was a gas supply. The bungalows and apartments in the city were relatively cheap, but that was only relative. Those in better locations were not cheap either. Additionally, there were many people living in the bungalows and apartments, so it was not quiet. In the end, it took Xia Pingan 2 days to find a small apartment of more than 50 square meters in a town on the outskirts of Shangjing City in the east of the city. In addition to the commission to be paid to the broker, the landlord of the small apartment required that the rent of the small apartment be paid 6 times a month, which meant that the rent had to be paid once every half a year. Furthermore, the rent was non-negotiable. Xia Pingan didn't have that much money, but he still had some bullets that he had collected. Xia Pingan inquired about it and found that the rune bullets of summoners could be sold in some gun shops in Shangjing City. Xia Pingan got dozens of rune bullets and sold them for 7 to 8 gold coins before paying the rent and settling down temporarily. On the second morning, Xia Pingan came to the fearless house of Bailing Alley in Shangjing City. Bailing Alley was located near Qianyuan Avenue in the east of Shangjing City. It was rather secluded and surrounded by several bustling commercial streets. On one side of Bailing Alley was a municipal park in Shangjing City. On the other side was a theater. There were also 2 brothels with pink lanterns hanging in the alley. As there were many girls in the brothels, this alley seemed to be filled with hidden fragrance, which aroused people's wild and fanciful thoughts. Xia Pingan came in from outside the alley and passed by the brothels. The girls in the brothels were leaning against the railings and throwing coquettish glances at Xia Pingan. "Young brother, you're so handsome. How about coming here? The girls in our courtyard are the most gentle and considerate." At the sight of Xia Pingan, the pimp at the entrance of the brothels pulled Xia Pingan's sleeves as his eyes narrowed into slits. "Can I buy on credit if I'm handsome?" Xia Pingan asked. The pimp's smile froze and he quickly let go of Xia Pingan's sleeves. "Young brother, you must be joking. Since ancient times, girls have been doing this kind of business to earn some hard-earned money. How could they buy on credit? Young brother, do you have the heart to do that?" "Sigh, if I can't buy on credit, then forget it." Xia Pingan sighed and continued walking inside. After walking for a while, he finally arrived at the entrance of the fearless house. Xia Pingan looked up and found that the so-called fearless house was actually a pawn shop. On top of the fearless house hung a plaque with the word, "Pawn Shop," written next to the signboard. Even the paint was peeling off a bit. At the entrance of the fearless house there was also a couplet. The first line read, "Money is the courage of heroes." The second line read, "Clothes are the hair of saints." This couplet, together with the signboard of the fearless house, gave people an indescribable feeling. Interesting. Just as Xia Pingan was sizing up the entrance of the fearless house, a customer shook his head and sighed as he walked out. As he walked, he weighed the money bag in his hand. When the man saw Xia Pingan, he quickly put the money bag away, afraid that he would be exposed. Xia Pingan touched his face before walking in. The pimp at the entrance of the brothel saw Xia Pingan walk into the pawn shop in the end, and couldn't help but spit on the ground and curse. "So it's a pauper. In your dreams, you want a whore for free." Xia Pingan walked up a few steps and walked into the fearless house. Only then did he realize that the fearless house was rather large and there were a few servants inside. As soon as he entered, a 15-year-old servant came up to greet him enthusiastically. "Sir, are you here to pawn something or to redeem it?" Xiaoping's heart skipped a beat. "Do you accept everything here?" "Sir, you must be joking. As long as it's something that can be sold and doesn't break the law, we accept it," the servant answered. "Do you accept rune bullets?" "Yes," the servant nodded. "I'm here to pawn some rune bullets. Let's see what price you can offer." "Sir, please follow me." Chapter 173. After bypassing a huge screen, the waiter led Xia Pingon to the antechamber of Fearless House. The antechamber of Fearless House was clean and tidy with 2 hanging baskets. There was an ebony table and 2 stools in the antechamber. In front of the antechamber was a pawnshop counter which was as high as a person's neck. A man was standing on tiptoe at the counter with his neck raised like a goose. Behind the counter was a middle-aged man in his 40s, who was wearing a pair of tortoiseshell glasses and a black felt hat. That middle-aged man was holding a pocket watch with a silver chain and was winding it up. He even put the pocket watch by his ear and listened to it. After that, he said to that pawnbroker in a condescending manner, "Dear customer, the cover of this watch is seriously worn out. Additionally, it's a bit old. The spring inside is a bit old. Therefore, it's not elastic anymore. Although this watch can still run, the time difference is much greater than that of a new watch. How about this? I'll value this watch at 30 silver coins. According to the rules of our pawnshop, we can only pawn it at 60% of the price. How about 18 silver coins for you? This watch is still new. It's still new. Boss, look at the painting on the dial. It's a gold-plated enamel dial. The chain of this pocket watch is also made of pure silver. This chain alone is worth several silver coins. Boss, please give me more. 18 silver coins are too little. I spent over 40 silver coins when I bought it." The man who pawned the pocket watch begged with a sad look. "I can only give you 1 more silver coin. 19 silver coins, no more." The middle-aged man behind the counter shook his head as he put the pocket watch on the counter. "If you think it's too little, you can take a look in other pawn shops." "Fine, 19 silver coins then," the pawnbroker hurriedly said. "Give him the invoice." The middle-aged man handed the watch to another man in his 20s beside the counter and asked him to give the pawnbroker the invoice. After that, he looked at Xia Pingon. Xia Pingon noticed that the pawnbroker's pupils slightly changed when he saw him. Commoners might not notice such a change, but for Xia Pingon, people's emotions and mental activities could be easily seen from the changes in their pupils. "Is this pawnbroker my contact? Judging from his bargaining just now, he's really good at cutting leak." "Boss, this customer wants to pawn a top-quality item," the waiter told the pawnbroker behind the counter. Top-quality item was the jargon of the pawnshop. Those valuable items and special items that could be used by summoners were all top-quality items. "I see. Take the customer to the room with Xiang at the back. I will be there soon," the pawnbroker behind the counter said. "Customer, please follow me," the waiter said as he led Xia Pingon to the aisle on the side of the front hall. After going around the back of the front hall, they came to a rather secluded room without windows. High-class pawnshops would sometimes have such a secret room for private conversations in order to take care of the customer's privacy. "Customer, please wait a moment. Our pawnbroker will be there soon." After leading Xia Pingon here, the waiter left. Before leaving, he even closed the door from the outside. Xia Pingon waited in the room. After a while, the pawnbroker came in from a side door and calmly walked to the opposite of Xia Pingon. Behind the tortoiseshell glasses, he looked at Xia Pingon from head to toe seriously. Finally, he sat on the chair beside Xia Pingon. "You are Xia Pingon?" the pawnbroker asked. Yes. May I know your name? My name is Lan Wei. I'm the pawnbroker of Fearless Pavilion and the contact person of the Shadow Squad of the Judgment Army. From now on, I will be the only one responsible for contacting you. If the contact person is changed, I will inform you in advance. Xia Pingan looked around the room. Is it safe to talk here? Lan Wei smiled. His eyes narrowed, his beard curled up, and the flesh on both sides of his cheeks split open. He smiled like a cunning and greasy hamster who had stolen a walnut. Don't worry. This room has been specially arranged. Nobody outside can hear our conversation. If our conversation falls into the ears and eyes of a third person, the arrangement in this room will send out a warning. We will know it immediately. What's the Shadow Squad? Why haven't I heard of the Shadow Squad in the Judgment Army before? Xia Pingan asked. The Shadow Squad is a secret in the Judgment Army. Not many people know about the existence of the Shadow Squad. Even within the Judgment Army, only a few relevant figures know about the existence of the Shadow Squad. You haven't joined the Judgment Army before, so it's even more impossible for you to know about it. You can understand the so-called Shadow Squad as the adjudicators who don't reveal their identities. They are the adjudicators who walk in the dark. The Shadow Squad carries out the special tasks of the Judgment Army, but these tasks are confidential and don't involve the adjudicators whose identities are revealed. With that said, Xia Pingan understood. He nodded his head. This Shadow Squad was like a plain-clothed and undercover agent whose identity would not be made public. Of course, in terms of the nature of the Judgment Army, he was not a plainclothes or undercover agent. The function of the Judgment Army was more like the combination of the Bright Gown Guards and the Knights Templar. The Shadow Squad was equivalent to the Bright Gown Guards and the Knights Templar who kept their identities secret. How many people in the Judgment Army know about my identity? Now, in the entire Great Shang Nation, only 3 people know about your identity as a Shadow Squad. One is me, the other is Priest Baizhu, who selected you to join the Shadow Squad. The last person is Lord Lin Yi, the Bishop of the Dark War God Church in the Great Shang Nation. Lord Lin Yi is the Commander-in-Chief of the Judgment Army. At the same time, he has the list of all the members of the Shadow Squad in the Judgment Army. Your mission also comes directly from Lord Lin Yi. Xia Pingan looked at Lan Wei and went straight to the point. I'll be frank. One of my important purposes in joining the Judgment Army is to obtain the Summoner's training resources through the Judgment Army. I want to know what are the benefits of becoming a Shadow Squad. Can it guarantee that I can continue to advance on the Summoner's path? Ha 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 ha. Lan Wei laughed and squinted at Xia Pingan. Don't worry. The resources you can enjoy by becoming a Shadow Squad are definitely much more than ordinary members of the Judgment Army. The resources you can enjoy are not only limited to the summoner profession, but also comprehensive. What do you mean? You'll know in the future. No one who joins the Shadow Squad will regret it. However, how much resources you can enjoy in the end depends on your ability and how much you can do, Lan Wei said. Lan Wei said as he took out a photo and a document. He put the photo and the document on the table and handed them to Xia Pingan. This task is a small test for you to join the Shadow Guards. This man is called Su Gui, a local bully in the port area of Shangjing City. He controls a small gang of over 100 people. What he does most is to deceive, abduct, and control women who come to Shangjing City and then send them to brothels to do the flesh business for him to make money. This man's hands have been stained with the lives of several foreign women. You can use this man to practice. No matter what method you use, it will be fine as long as you don't let him live. Xia Pingan looked at the photo. In the photo was a bald man with a fierce face. He was hugging 2 enchanting beauties on his left and right. The man's bald head was tattooed with a green dragon. At first glance, one could tell that he was not a good person. Wouldn't it be over if such a person was arrested by the police and tried? Is there a need to mobilize the Shadow Squad? Xia Pingan asked. This Sugui looks like a burly man, but he's very cunning. The police don't have direct evidence of his crimes, so they can't do anything to him through normal legal procedures. In the previous cases where people died, he let his subordinates take the blame, and he himself stayed out of it. Therefore, special people use special methods to deal with them. Oh right, this person also has a one-son summoner called Lei Bai. That summoner is both his bodyguard and his military advisor. He's very difficult to deal with. If you want to directly rush over and take his head, it won't be that easy. It's not easy to get rid of his head. Xia Pingan took the information, glanced at it, and directly threw it into his space warehouse. Is there a time limit for completing this task? No, you can report to me when you complete it. Remember, under no circumstances can you reveal your identity as a Shadow Squad member. Chapter 174. Rune bullets could really be pawned in the Fearless House. When Xia Pingan took out some rune bullets and said that he wanted to pawn them, Lan Wei looked at him in surprise. He thought Xia Pingan would leave after accepting the mission, but he didn't expect Xia Pingan to take out some yellow rune bullet. I've just arrived in Shangjing, and I'm really short on money, Xia Pingan said. Lan Wei picked up a rune bullet, looked at it carefully, and nodded. Your rune bullet is not bad. The runes on the bullet are flexible and smooth. It can be considered a fine rune bullet. It is enchanted with a fireball spell, which is very useful against many low-level monsters. This bullet can also be used as an incendiary bomb, which can be used by summoners and ordinary people. The consumption of this thing in Shangjing City is huge. It can be used in the underground city of Shangjing City and those island defense lines. Did you make this thing? Yes. Xia Pingan nodded. He was moved by what Lan Wei said about the underground city and island defense line. He had heard from Elder Jing that there was an underground city under Shangjing that was suppressing the Devil's Den. Shangjing was facing the sea to the east, and some magical creatures from the sea would come ashore to harass it from time to time. The Shang dynasty had navy and summoners guarding some of the islands in the east. Rune bullets can be used in the underground city and island defense line of Shangjing? Of course. There are many low-level magical creatures in the dungeon and in the sea. The military and the church will supply rune bullets to the dungeon and the island garrisons regularly. If you want to sell rune bullets in the future, you can go to the Fearless House. This thing can provide you with a cover and give you a legitimate reason to come here. I can buy it at the market price of 17 silver coins per bullet. 17 silver coins for a rune bullet? Xia Pingan nodded. This price was 1 silver coin more than what he sold previously. In this world's agreed currency system, the exchange rate between gold coins and silver coins was 50 times. 1 gold coin could be exchanged for 50 standard silver coins, while the exchange rate between silver coins and copper coins was 100 times. After adapting these days, Xia Pingan found that in terms of purchasing power, the purchasing power of gold coins in this world was still very strong. The price of a cow was about 1 gold coin. Many ordinary people might not even be able to earn 1 gold coin with a person's salary. About 3 rune bullets could be exchanged for 1 gold coin. As long as he spent some divine power to make a few rune bullets every month, it wouldn't be difficult to settle down in Shangjing. This was the benefit of having a skill. Do you usually receive a realm pearl here? Xia Pingan asked. He was very close to advancing to the One Sun realm. After coming to this world, Xia Pingan felt that he was still too weak in this world. He urgently wanted to obtain a realm pearl to advance to the One Sun realm. Yes. Lan Wei glanced at Xia Pingan. He seemed to know what Xia Pingan was thinking. Lan Wei smiled. Actually, You don't have to worry. As long as you kill Sugui, you will have the resources to advance to the One Sun realm. I usually receive some ordinary realm pearls here. The price ranges from hundreds of gold coins to tens of thousands of gold coins. High-end realm pearls are usually not sold in pawnshop. They are usually sent to special channels or auctions. If you want a realm pearl, I can keep it for you when I receive one in the future. Okay, thanks. When Xia Pingon left Fearless House, Xia Pingon had a few more gold coins on him. Although he was still poor, at least he was no longer in dire straits. At this moment, Xia Pingon's mind was filled with Su Gui's information. What moved Xia Pingon the most was Lan Wui's words. As long as you kill Su Gui, you will have the resources to advance to the One Sun realm. Xia Pingon did not doubt the information that Lan Wei gave him about Su Gui. After all, Su Gui was just a nobody in Shangjing City. As long as he put in some effort, he could easily investigate his background. The first task that the Shadow Guards gave him was definitely not to deceive him with fake information. This was because this method was too low level and could be easily exposed. There was no need to do so. Capable people should not be used. This was the most basic way of using people in a superior position. As for being used by others, Xia Pingon did not care at all. As long as Su Gui deserved to die, he did not care if he was being used by others. If a nobody wanted to stand out and grow in a place like Shangjing City, they would have to start by being used by others. They would even have to take the initiative to be used by others, such as joining the Judgment Army. If a person had no value in being used by others, he would never stand out. After exiting Bailing Alley and coming to Qianyuan Avenue, Xia Pingon waved his hand and called a carriage to East Harbor. 2 hours later, the carriage arrived at Donggang. At this time, it was already noon. Xia Pingon paid the fare and got off the carriage. He walked through 2 bustling streets and arrived at a tea house. He went up to the second floor of the tea house and ordered 2 steamers of steamed buns and some porridge. While eating to fill his stomach, he activated his remote vision ability. Xia Pingon only imagined Su Gui's appearance in his mind. His remote viewing ability soon locked onto Su Gui's location. Su Gui was not far from Xia Pingon. The straight line distance was only over 1,000 meters. In a room with the sign Gui Li Business in the harbor area, Su Gui was lying on a recliner. While eating grapes, he was listening to a man in a black short coat standing beside him. Su Gui looked exactly the same as in the photo. He was lying on a chair with his clothes open, revealing his round belly and chest. There was a circle of black hair on his chest, making him look like a bear. There were tattoos all over his arms and chest, depicting dragons and tigers. It was a little scary. 2 enchanting women in tulle were kneeling beside him. One was massaging his legs, while the other was feeding him grape. The man standing in front of Su Gui lowered his head and spoke. He only dared to peek at the 2 women beside Su Gui. In the room, there was another man standing behind Su Gui. That man was wearing a purple robe with a summoner's gold frontlet on his head. He looked indifferent and arrogant. Xia Pingon heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the summoner standing behind Su Gui didn't make any movements under his gaze. This remote viewing was just a test for Xia Pingon. His target was not Su Gui, but the summoner beside Su Gui. Although the summoner was a One Sun realm summoner, he did not have the remote viewing ability and could not sense his gaze. This made things easier. Xia Pingon did not move his gaze away. His remote viewing ability was on the roof of the room. He looked down and sized up the people in the room. Inside Gui Li Business. Grandpa Su, the situation is like this. After the women were trained at the broker house, they were sent to Yixiang Garden and Man Tingchun. One of the women had a strong personality. When she found out that she was going to a brothel, she ran away from the brothel that night. However, we were prepared and caught her that night. She is now locked up in the warehouse of the broker house. The man standing in front of Sugui was reporting the situation at the broker house to Sugui. He run, run. Sugui casually spat out grape seeds as he ate them. A woman beside him caught the grape seeds with her hand. Did you sign a contract with the woman at the broker house? Of course we signed it. Even if that woman wants to file a lawsuit, no one can find fault with our broker contract. Starve her for 2 days and beat her up. If she doesn't want to go, just let her pay the compensation and give her interest. Ordinary women will go to the brothel after a few days. You don't need me to teach you this, Sugui said calmly and didn't care at all. Yes, this humble one understands, this humble one understands. The man standing in front of Sugui nodded and bowed. Young Master Lu wants a few fresh and clean goods. You have to pay more attention these few days. This is a big customer. Don't ruin this business. Yes, I will pass down the order. Tell my brothers to pay more attention at the docks these few days. Chapter 175. Xia Pingan stared at Sugui for 3 days with his remote viewing ability. In these 3 days, Xia Pingan finally knew how Sugui tricked, abducted, and controlled those women who came to Shangjing City. Shangjing City was a prosperous place in the Shang dynasty. Because of this, there were countless women with various thoughts pouring into the city from all directions almost every day. Many women had never been to Shangjing City before. They all heard that there were many rich and powerful families in Shangjing City. Not only was it easy to make money in Shangjing City, but they could also become a phoenix if they were not careful. Those women who came to Shangjing City alone or with 1 or 2 female companions were the targets of Sugui and his men. Sugui's men opened a broker house in the dock area. The broker house was equivalent to an intermediary company, promising to find jobs for those who came here. Many people in the broker house were looking for targets at the dock every day. When they saw those women who came alone or with 1 or 2 companions, the people in the broker house went to talk to them and promised to find them jobs such as nannies, maids in Shangjing City. The benefits were high, the treatment was good, and they were from rich families. Many women who came to Shangjing City for the first time had no other ability to make a living. What they wanted to find was this kind of ordinary job. When they heard the introduction of the broker house, they were tempted. Then the broker house tricked them to the broker house, signed a contract, trained them for a few days, and sent them to the brothels in Shangjing City to work as maids. For most women who came to the brothels for the first time, they resisted in the beginning. But once they wanted to go back on their word, the broker house immediately took out a contract. If they did not work, they would lose money. Many women would give in at this time, thinking that they could stay in the brothels for a while and then leave. But when women thought like this, they were finished. The environment of the brothels was a big dye vat for women. When a woman who worked as a maid saw that the money she earned after toiling for a month in a brothel was less than the money other women earned by lying down for a night, she would be easily dragged into the water and walk on the path of no return once she felt that it was unfair. There were 1 or 2 stubborn women who wanted to go back on their word. The broker house would take out the contract and ask the woman to pay the money for tearing up the contract. The woman would also have to bear the debt of the loan shark. At this time, Sugui and his men would use a little more means, such as coercion, enticement, and intimidation. 95% of the women would not be able to pass this second stage and would return to the brothel. Many women committed suicide because they couldn't take it anymore. The person in charge of the broker house was Sugui's subordinate, not Sugui himself. On the surface, Sugui was running a Guili firm, which dealt in raw silk, cotton cloth, and tea. He didn't care about the business of the broker house at all. No matter how serious the contract disputes between the broker house and those women were, even if a lawsuit was filed, Sugui would not be involved. As for the profits of the broker house, Su Gui would transfer them to Gui Li firm, through the business between the broker house and Gui Li firm. Su Gui was a black merchant who used contracts and human weaknesses to control and enslave women. He was so good at it that even the police couldn't find any evidence against him. Over the years, Su Gui had tricked countless women in Shangjing City, but he had also made a profit. This guy really deserved to die. But it wasn't easy to kill him, because Su Gui had a summoner bodyguard that he spent a lot of money to hire. Su Gui's summoner bodyguard was inseparable from Su Gui. Wherever Su Gui went, the summoner would be there. Even when Su Gui slept at night, the summoner would sleep in the room next to Su Gui's. In addition to the summoner, Su Gui also had a few guards around him. They were also armed with live ammunition. They followed him every day to protect his safety. It was probably because he had done too many guilty things. Su Gui's life was cautious, for fear that someone would seek revenge on him. Even the food he ate every meal had to be tested for poison before he dared to eat it. In this case, it was really a test to take Su Gui's life. It was definitely impossible to force it. The summoner bodyguard beside Su Gui was not to be trifled with. The possibility of poisoning could also be ruled out. Su Gui usually lived in seclusion. It was really not easy to find an opportunity to make a move. Xia Pingan finally knew why the first mission given to him by the Shadow Guards was to take Su Gui's life. This Su Gui's life was indeed not easy to take. The difficult part was how to kill Su Gui without exposing himself or making contact with the summoner. However, after watching Su Gui for 3 days, Xia Pingan also discovered a hobby of Su Gui's, or rather, a habit. Su Gui liked to swim. Every afternoon, Su Gui would leave home or Gui Li business, and go to Shangjing City to swim from a river near the sea for a while. Su Gui was very good at swimming. He especially liked to stand on a large rock by the river bank and dive into the river from a height of 7 or 8 meters. However, every time Su Gui went to swim, his bodyguard would clear the area and guard on both sides of the river to prevent others from approaching. The water in the river was so clear that one could see the bottom and went straight to the sea. It was not easy to poison or hide people in the river. However, this was not a problem for Xia Pingan. After observing Su Gui for 3 days, a plan to kill Su Gui had quietly formed in Xia Pingan's mind. On the afternoon of the 4th day after receiving this mission, the prepared Xia Pingan first went to the river where Su Gui swam every day. The river was in a col in the mountains. The surrounding environment was quite quiet, and there was almost no one around. The scorching sun was shining overhead. Birds were chirping and cicadas were chirping in the mountains. The riverside was covered in green trees. Xia Pingan was more than 200 meters upstream of the place where Su Gui usually went into the water. He took off his clothes and went into the water first. The river here was so clear that one could see the bottom. Standing by the river, one could look through the sparkling river and see the pebbles and fine sand in the river clearly. After confirming that there was no one around, Xia Pingan began to act in the water. Under the water, Xia Pingan consumed 36 points of divine power and summoned a Xuanwu. Xuanwu was a divine beast that could control water. He was very happy and carefree in the water. Xia Pingan took a few large stones from the bottom of the river and had Xuanwu completely freeze the water around the stones, forming a base of ice. Ordinary ice cubes would float on the water surface, but the ice cubes with stones inside would sink into the water instead of floating on the water surface. Moreover, the ice cubes were frozen by the river water. They were crystal clear and completely transparent. When placed in the water, it was like a piece of glass placed in the water. There was nothing unusual about it at all. After the large ice cubes were placed in the water, Xia Pingan had Xuanwu grow 3 chi long sharp ice spikes on the base of the ice cubes. This time, the large ice cubes that sank into the water quietly hid under the water like the spikes in a trap. They were completely transparent. Unless one went into the water and touched them with their hands, they would not be able to see anything unusual from the shore. After doing this, Xia Pingan carried the ice cubes down to the place where Su Gue had jumped into the water. After making some arrangements in the water, Xia Pingan quickly swam back to the place where he had jumped into the water. He put on his clothes and waited for Su Gue to come. Su Gue came as scheduled. Su Gui's summoner bodyguard also came. Su Gui's summoner bodyguard first checked the place where Su Gue had swum. After confirming that there were no fluctuations of divine power and no one within 100 meters, he nodded to Su Gue and retreated to one side. After checking both sides of the river, Su Gui's bodyguard found that everything was normal. Su Gue, who had taken off his clothes, directly climbed onto the large stone where he had jumped into the water as usual. After stretching his limbs, he drank a mouthful of the warming wine handed to him by the woman beside him. After that, he laughed and touched his bald head. After that, he suddenly plunged into the river. Su Gui's movements were natural and unrestrained, just like the legendary white stripe in the waves. What Su Gue didn't know was that there was a dragon-slaying platform in the clear river. The moment Su Gue entered the water, there was not a big splash, but the river water turned red in an instant. Su Gui's body was pierced by more than 10 sharp, transparent ice spikes at once. He was strung to the bottom of the river. One of the ice spikes directly pierced through Su Gui's eye and into his brain. Assassin! Su Gui's bodyguard shouted in fright. The two women who had followed Su Gue here were so frightened by the scene in the river that they screamed in fear. Su Gui's summoner bodyguard roared and pointed with his finger. A wave of water lifted Su Gue out of the water. However, Su Gue was not breathing. Chapter 176. With a sound of chi. Xia Pingan's long sword penetrated through a man's head in a split second. However, the man was going to draw out his pistol. At the same time, the two elite slave soldiers summoned by Xia Pingan had thrown out their javelins in front of the other men's flurried eyes. In only a few meters, the sharp spearheads had penetrated through the chests of the two men who were going to stand up. The great strength of the javelins directly sent the two men flying backward, causing them to crash against the wall behind them. The javelins of elite slave soldiers could kill demon rats, not to mention ordinary people. One of the two elite slave soldiers rushed forward as he pierced through the neck of a man who was about to stand up with his long spear. With a flick of his long spear, almost half of that man's neck was cut off. He was sent flying by the long spear of the elite slave soldier. After flying in the air, he heavily fell onto the ground. Another man wanted to escape. He had already reached the window, however. He was chased by the other elite slave soldier. The elite slave soldier was still several meters away. With a table in between, it had already hooked the man's thigh with its long spear. After that, the man uttered a miserable harumph as he fell onto the ground. Before he stood up, the head of the long spear had penetrated through the back of his head and nailed him onto the ground. For these ruffians who could only bully women in the harbor area, the two elite slave soldiers in the room were nothing less than killing gods with flickering red eyes. "Who are you?" "We're innocent." A man pushed back the chair behind him as he moved back with a flurried look. At the same time, he shouted and wanted to escape. Xia Pingan's body was like a ferocious tiger. He kicked off the table in the room and pounced forward. Before the man could push the door open, Xia Pingan's long sword pierced through the man's throat like a meteor. The man covered his neck with his eyes wide open as he watched Xia Pingan slowly fall down. In the next second, Xia Pingan threw out his long sword. As a cold light, the long sword directly penetrated through the chest of a man who was quivering all over and was going to take out his pistol from 10 m away. Closely after that man slowly fell onto the ground. "I'll fight you to the death." A man in a short coat had bloodshot eyes. In his fear, he erupted with great potential. He actually took out a short knife and rushed toward Xia Pingan, who was standing at the door. Xia Pingan coldly stared at the man, as if he was looking at an ant. Until the man rushed in front of him, Xia Pingan punched out, directly hitting the man's chest. Puff! That man's red eyes popped out abruptly as they became bloodshot and almost popped out of their eye sockets. The short gown on the back of that man's heart was instantly shattered by a strong force, revealing a fist-sized hole. Closely after that man fell down in front of Xia Pingan like a cooked noodle. Xia Pingan's punch had directly shattered that man's heart. At the same time, the two elite slave soldiers threw out their javelins and stabbed their long halberds towards the last few people in the room. Chi! Chi! Ah! In the air-piercing sound and a few muffled and short miserable groans, the last few people in the room fell down and lost their vitality. From the moment Xia Pingan broke in to the end of the battle, it took less than 10 seconds. The people who had just met in this room to discuss what to do in the future after Su Gui's death had all fallen to the ground and became corpses on the ground. This was the office of Su Gui's broker house in the port area of Shangjing City. It was almost 9:00 p.m. at night. After receiving the news of Su Gui's death, the heads of this broker house quickly gathered here and discussed what to do in the future. Although Su Gui was dead, this business could still be done. Almost none of Su Gui's subordinates in the broker house felt sad about Su Gui's death. On the contrary, many of them were very happy and excited as they thought it was finally their turn to make a fortune. They were all discussing how to continue their business, how to supply brothels, and how to share the profit. Right then, Xia Pingan suddenly appeared like a killing god. In just a few seconds, no one was alive in this office. Xia Pingan glanced around the room with icy eyes. The two elite slave soldiers were like two ice-cold killing machines. After none of the people in the broker house could stand up, the two slave soldiers were still stabbing those corpses with their long halberd. At this moment, after Su Gui's summoner bodyguard had sent Su Gui home, he had already disappeared without a trace with some of Su Gui's belongings. That summoner was smart. He sensed danger. Additionally, Su Gui's death was very strange. He didn't know who killed him at all. After Su Gui's death, the transparent icicle under the water was fished up. However, in less than 2 hours, it had completely melted into water. Even the evidence had disappeared. That summoner knew that Su Gui usually did shady things. Additionally, he was the only summoner on the scene after Su Gui's death. Without any evidence, Su Gui couldn't even explain how he died. After jumping into the water and swimming, he died with holes all over his body. That summoner was afraid that he would be implicated. Therefore, he directly packed up his belongings and ran away. At this moment, the women around Su Gui were crying in Su Gui's home. They were arguing over the small amount of money. When Su Gui's body was sent home, a few policemen surrounded it. They were taking statements, but they could only helplessly look at everything in front of them. At night, the streets in the harbor area were still very boisterous. Nobody outside noticed what was happening in this room. Of course, Su Gui had more subordinates than these people. However, they were all the heads of Su Gui's broker house. Therefore, Su Gui's broker house fell apart. In the blink of an eye, Xia Pingan had moved all the corpses in the room into his own space teleportation warehouse. There was no corpse left in the room. Xia Pingan searched through several filing cabinets in the room and easily found a large number of contracts and IOUs in the room. Those contracts and IOUs were used by this broker house to trick and threaten those women who had been cheated into signing them. They were also the tools used by this broker house to coerce and control those weak women. Those contracts and IOUs were marked with fingerprints. All the contracts and IOUs took up an entire cabinet. Before leaving the room, Xia Pingan snapped his fingers. At the same time, the two elite slave soldiers disappeared in a split second. At the same time, a flame appeared and those IOUs started to burn. 1 minute later, Xia Pingan walked out of the alley on the other side of the small building where the broker house was located calmly. The gas lamps on the street had been lit. The streets in the harbor area were still bustling with pedestrians and vehicles. Passengers, ships and goods were coming and going on the wharf almost all day long. Even though it was late at night, this place was still more boisterous than other places. A four-wheeled carriage was parked at the roadside of the alley. At the sight of Xia Pingan, the coachman hurriedly opened the door of the carriage for Xia Pingan with a smile. "Dear guest, have you delivered the gift to your friend?" I've delivered it. Sorry to keep you waiting," Xia Pingan said to the coachman as he stepped onto the ladder of the carriage. Not at all, not at all. It's just a short while. About half a cigarette's time. By the way, dear guest, where are you going now?" The coachman asked with a smile. Actually, it was not easy to meet a guest like Xia Pingan. He spoke politely and gave a generous fare. If the coachman could give a rating to a passenger, Xia Pingan would definitely be a 5-star passenger. Yuhong Road Wharf. Okay. Seeing Xia Pingan get on the carriage, the coachman shook the reins and drove the carriage away. Yuhong Road Wharf was not far from here. Beside the wharf was Chinan River. There were ferries and some gaily painting pleasure boats beside the wharf. It was also a boisterous place. A few minutes after Xia Pingan left in the carriage, the police patrolling the streets here found the fire in the building of the broker house. The police blew the whistle. 10 minutes later, the fire brigade's carriage, which was ringing all the way, arrived and began to put out the fire. The fire had already burned down half of the small building of the broker house. Chapter 177. When Xia Pingan sat in the four-wheeled carriage and headed towards the wharf of Yuhong Road, several farmers that he had summoned were busy working in the secret mandala of Xia Pingan. In the secret warehouse, besides those corpses that Xia Pingan had just put inside, there were also some handcuffs and shackles that Xia Pingan had brought from the warehouse of the broker house. Those handcuffs and shackles were made of iron and were quite heavy. They were usually used by the broker house to imprison and intimidate those women. Once those women who refused to surrender were caught by the broker house would put them in handcuffs and shackles and lock them up in their own warehouse, where they would be intimidated and tortured until those women surrendered. Those farmers in the secret mandala were putting those handcuffs and shackles on those corpses, which could be considered as returning them to their rightful owners. It didn't take long for the carriage to arrive at the wharf of Yuhong Road. Xia Pingan got off the carriage and spent more than 10 copper coins to buy a ferry ticket at the wharf. He was just in time to catch the last ferry tonight. A few minutes after boarding the ferry, the steam ferry had sounded its whistle twice on the wharf. Black smoke rose from the chimney of the ferry. The steam turbine on the ferry started to rotate and drive the paddles. At the sight of it, the aged ferry left the wharf like a staggered old bull and drove towards the opposite bank of Chinan River. Water splashed on the river's surface. Xia Pingan sat at the stern of the ferry. This was the last ferry of the night. Less than a third of the seats were full. The ferry was filled with people who were working hard in Shangjing City. A few stevedores were leaning against the chair in front of Xia Pingan. As soon as the ferry started, they started snoring and fell asleep. They were still holding half-eaten pancakes in their hands. There were a few factory workers who were still wearing their work clothes. They sat together tiredly and discussed in low voices that their overtime pay had been deducted again. A policeman who had just gotten off work took off his hat and sat at the front of the ferry. That policeman was slightly fat. Looking from the back, there was already a layer of white hair on his head. The hat and collar of his police uniform were covered with a layer of white salt stains that had been soaked by sweat. A few of them looked like students studying in Shangjing City. There were 2 other women. One of them looked like a salesperson in a shopping mall. She was sitting on the ferry and rubbing her numb calves. The other woman was pretty. She was in her 20s and wore a blue coat and a beige wide-brimmed hat. She had a delicate face and a hint of intellectual temperament. Her brows were slightly furrowed as she looked at the river. It seemed like she had a lot on her mind. The pleasure boats and cruise ships on the Chenan River were still brightly lit. The lights on the pleasure boats and cruise ships made the Chenan River look particularly enchanting in the night. The sound of singing and music drifted along with the river breeze, revealing a sense of extravagance. The highest-class brothel in Shangjing was actually not in the alleys on the ground, but on the surface of the Chenan River. He wondered how Yen Duo and Jiang Duo were doing. Xia Pingan felt a little lonely at the thought of his mission in Yuanqiu. But soon, Xia Pingan dispelled the trace of emotion in his heart. He stretched his hand out of the ferry and touched the splashing waves on the ferry. The shackled corpses in the secret warehouse were silently thrown into the Chenan River by Xia Pingan. Along with the waves stirred up by the ferry, the corpses sank to the bottom of the river one by one, accompanying the fishes and shrimps. The Chenan River was indeed a good place to bury corpses, especially at night. It was simply undetectable. He did not expect to start doing this kind of work when he had just arrived in Shangjing City for a few days. Thinking of what Elder Jing said to him a few days ago, Xia Pingan laughed self-deprecatingly. More than 10 minutes later, the ferry on the river met the ferry coming from the opposite side. They greeted each other with whistles. After about 20 minutes, the ferry arrived at the pier opposite the Chenan River. The stevedores who were sleeping were woken up. The people on the ferry went to the pier one by one and left. Outside the pier, there were some rickshaws and carriages waiting to carry passengers to make money at night. Several supper stalls were also set up by the roadside. The people who got off the ferry were preparing to go home, while some were still working at this time. Not many people living in this city had it easy. It was not easy for Xia Pingan either. His stomach had been starving for a long time. Today was a day of work. From morning to night, he only ate 2 steamed buns and drank a bowl of millet porridge when he went out in the morning. He saw that there were noodles, steamed dumplings, and braised meat on the night stalls outside the pier. The fragrance of the food came with the wind and spread under the street lights. Xia Pingan's stomach suddenly growled and began to protest. In this world, what Xia Pingan was most satisfied with was food. The food in this world had its original taste. There were no preservatives, gutter oil, lean meat powder, ripening agent and other messy things. All the food, even the street snacks, only had the authentic mellow aroma of the food itself and the seasoning. There was nothing else after it was cooked. Xia Pingan came to the night stall and ordered a bowl of noodles and a portion of braised meat at a small stall under the street lamp. After eating, he called a carriage and prepared to return to his rented house. Xia Pingan's house was still some distance away from here. It was in the suburbs of the city. It would take more than half an hour to get there by carriage. After running for a few minutes, the carriage passed by a roadside alley. Sitting in the carriage, Xia Pingan saw the movement in the alley and hurriedly asked the coachman to stop. The coachman also saw the movement in the alley and heard something. He could faintly hear a woman's cry for help. There were many people in the alley, but there were no street lamps here. It was dark on both sides of the alley, so he could not see clearly. Although the coachman stopped the carriage, he looked a little scared and hesitant. "Sir, you're not a policeman. It's so late. You'd better mind your own business. Those people are not to be trifled with. Why don't you go to the police station and call the police?" "It's too late to call the police." "You don't have to go. Just wait for me over there," Xia Pingan said as he walked towards the alley. Summoners had the ability to see things in the dark. Just now, he saw that the young and beautiful woman who had taken the ferry with him was blocked by several hooligans in the alley ahead. Those hooligans began to molest her. The situation was not good, and the woman was scared and screamed. In this kind of environment, if he did not intervene, that woman would probably be miserable tonight. Before Xia Pingan walked into the alley, he heard a jia sound. Xia Pingan turned his head and saw that the coachman of the carriage he had just been in was shaking the reins. He did not stay for a moment and drove the carriage away. He did not stay to wait for Xia Pingan at all. F***ck. Xia Pingan cursed and quickened his pace as he walked into the alley. There were 4 hooligans in the alley. They also noticed that Xia Pingan was walking towards them. The hooligans stopped at the same time and exchanged glances. F***ck, where did this kid come from? How dare you meddle in our business? You're courting death. One of the hooligans scolded. His eyes flashed fiercely. He took out a shiny dagger and stabbed it directly towards Xia Pingan's lower abdomen. How could that hooligan be Xia Pingan's opponent? Seeing that the hooligan was stabbing towards him with a dagger, Xia Pingan grabbed the hooligan's wrist and twisted it forcefully. With a kacha sound, the hooligan's wrist holding the dagger was directly broken by Xia Pingan. The hooligan let out a blood-curdling scream. His face suddenly distorted and the dagger in his hand fell down. Xia Pingan took the dagger that the hooligan had dropped. Without thinking, he stabbed the dagger into the hooligan's thigh. The blade of the dagger was completely submerged. Only the handle of the dagger was in Xia Pingan's hand. This time, the hooligan's face was distorted. His eyes protruded out like a dead fish's. Xia Pingan held the dagger in one hand. His face was expressionless as he looked coldly at the other hooligans. He slowly twisted the dagger in the hooligan's thigh. The dagger was like a key that was inserted into a lock. It slowly rotated in the flesh. The blade of the dagger slowly rotated 90 degrees in the flesh of the hooligan's thigh. This was simply torture. The people around could even hear the sound of the dagger's blade scraping against the bone. The hooligan that was grabbed by Xia Pingan had blue veins popping out on his face. He didn't make a sound and directly fainted while foaming at the mouth. Xia Pingan didn't say a word. Just one stab was enough to stun the hooligans. Looking at Xia Pingan's calm face from beginning to end, the hooligans knew that they had encountered a ruthless character that they couldn't afford to offend. Their faces changed drastically and their bodies trembled. They didn't dare to rush over again. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.